second time you do that.
I'd like to call this meeting to order of Lafayette Parish School Board on February 7th, 2018. I'd like everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States and presentation of colors by the Como High Naval Junior ROTC. Pledge allegiance, flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. First item on the agenda is opening comments from the superintendent.
Mr. Knezik, board members, good evening. Members of the board, I would like to take a little time just to recognize our past president for 2017, Ms. Dawn Morris. She served as board president during a very, very challenging year, and we want to thank her for the service that she provided to the board. She will be receiving a plaque this evening that says, your guidance and direction as our board president has strengthened the bond between the community and our school system. The Lafayette Parish School System, in collaboration with stakeholders, is committed to developing productive citizens prepared to compete in a global community, strength, tradition, excellence. So I want to thank you, Ms. Morris, for your leadership during 2017. Members of the board, congratulations goes out to Dr. Shauna LeBlanc for securing for the district a VEX Robotics grant. Lafayette Parish received the grant for 4 elementary and 6 middle schools throughout the Robotics Education Foundation and the La STEM Council. The awarded grant also includes robotic material making. The value of the grant is close to $6,000. Participating schools are Judy's Middle, Karen Crow Middle, David Thibodeau STEM Middle, Paulboro Middle, Acadian Middle, Lafayette Middle, Elio Judy's, J.W. Falk Elementary, S.J. Montgomery, and J. Wallace James Elementary School. And thank you also goes out to the United Way of Acadiana for awarding the Lafayette Parish School System with a venture grant for $35,000. The purpose of this grant is to provide our 8th grade students an opportunity to attend summer school to remove academic deficiencies. The amount awarded to each 8th grade student applying for summer school will be dependent on the number of applicants and the number of courses requested. More information will be forthcoming from Brian Hebert, our Director of Middle and High Schools. The Transportation Department is in the final phase of installing cameras on the district school buses. At the conclusion of this project, each bus will be fitted with 5 high-definition cameras. The ultimate purpose in the placement of the cameras on the buses has been to provide a safe ride for students and drivers alike. The cameras have already been of value in addressing unsafe behavior by students and sometimes drivers, and for affirming appropriate behavior. On January 18th was a special evening at the Hyman Performing Arts Center, as 2 of our LPSS teachers were the finalists in the LEF Teacher Awards. Congratulations to Becky Cade, elementary teacher finalist, and J. Wallace James, and Jason Simon, a high school teacher from Como High School. Congratulations also to 3 of our high school students whose artwork was chosen for the 2018 LSU statewide juried high school exhibition. 2 students are from Southside High School, Carly Blanchard and Sophia Velada, and 1 from Como High School, Haley Weiss. Congratulations goes out to Southside High visual arts teacher Kimberly Thibodeau and Ove Como High visual arts teacher Lacey Fangu. The LSU Ag Center is pleased to announce the winners of their 4th annual En Cuisine de Jardin Cook-Off, which was held on Saturday, January 20th at David Thibodeau STEM. First place goes out to Alice Boucher Elementary School, or the Boucher Grillers, led by Maria Tardera, coach, teacher, youth team members consisting of 2nd graders Timmy Chasson Jr., James Hamilton, Jada Mouton, Hayden Richard, and Luca Von Aspern, with Elroy Broussard, LPSS, School Board member, District 3, and Chef Charles Von Aspern. 2nd place went to Ernest Gallet. Their team was led by Hannah LeBlanc, coach and teacher, 3rd grade team members, and Matt Romero, Youngsville City Councilman, and Chef Jacob Williams. And 3rd place went out to Elio Judy's Elementary. Team was led by Cindy Dupre, coach teacher, youth team members consisting of 5th graders, and Mary Morrison, our board member from District 1, and Chef Mindy Pardos. On January 23rd, 25th, and 26th was a special time at Truman Early Childhood Education Center as the students participated in their winter performance. The Wonders of Winter, as it was called, was a collaborative effort of physical movement and music. Thank you to Jessica Eister and Daniel Gale, Acadiana Symphony Orchestra, and Becky Olenforst and Francita Houston, Physical Education Department. On January 26th, students from across Lafayette Parish participated in the Lafayette Honor Choir Clinic and Concert. A total of 126 students in 5th and 6th grade from across the parish were hand-selected by the chorus teachers to participate in the Elementary Honor Choir. A total of 110 7th and 8th grade students from across the district auditioned in November and earned a place in the Middle School Honor Choir. The choirs performed beautifully to a full house at the First Baptist Church in Lafayette. Congratulations to our Chief Academic Officer, Annette Samick. She was recognized by the Louisiana Foreign Language Teachers Association for her leadership and commitment to strengthen and advocate for world language education. Of significant note is the fact that Lafayette Parish Schools is the only district in Louisiana to offer two-way immersion in any language. The entire school board is to be commended for this initiative and, of course, state recognition. On January 30th, LPSS celebrated the high school graduation. Congratulations to our 6 graduates from Edward J. Sam Accelerated School of Lafayette. 5 students attended the ceremony, and the venue was full of family members and staff. It was incredible to see the parental support for these 5 individuals participating in this graduation exercise. One of these students completed 10 Carnegie units in the fall semester in order to graduate on January 30th. The next graduation will be in July. And congratulations to the Como High Speech and Debate varsity team. They traveled to Atlanta, Georgia, and competed in the Barkley Forum for High Schools held at Emory University. This is the oldest national circuit tournament and requires schools to apply for membership based on their performance record at previous national tournaments. This was Como's 2nd year as a member school. There were over 150 schools from across the country in attendance, with each individual event starting with about 100 competitors. Como High School had more finalists in interpretation events than any other school. Awards were late last night, and results are as follows. Breaking to quarterfinals, the top 24. In prose poetry, Paige Albright. In humorous interp, Colby Camp. breaking to semifinals, which is the top 12, in dramatic interp, Paige Albright; in prose interp, Anthony Rodriguez; in duo interp, the team of Emily Guidry and Anthony Rodriguez. Breaking to finals, so top 6 and placing. In prose poetry, Emily Guidry, 4th, Kobe Camp, 3rd. In humorous interp, Jack Gosson, 2nd place. And congratulations to James Simon, Como High's speech and debate team, for a huge success for their speech team. And then the last little bit of news, the Lafayette Parish Association of Educators has invited everyone to attend the annual Read Across America event on Saturday, March 3rd from 10 to 1 at the main branch of the Lafayette Public Library. Participants will join a nationwide celebration of the birthday of our beloved children's author, Dr. Seuss, with stories, crafts, birthday cake, and a visit from the Cat in the Hat. And that concludes my good news.
Thank you, Dr. Aguilar. Fellow board members, Mr. Broussard had a comment he wanted to share with us.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Aguilar stole my thunder. I was supposed to announce the names of the students and the teacher from Alice Boucher and boast about our victory, but he got ahead of me. But still, in all, I'd like to say congratulations to the Alice Boucher family, students as well. And this is the winning award that's supposed to be posted to the students, and I'm glad to post it in front of my seat to let my fellow board members know who previous winners, Ms. Morrison, Mr. Lachelet, that it's my time now. But I do want to congratulate them. But just as important as winning the cook-off, we had the largest attendance, and we were the most organized. And the presentations that the students done was excellent. They are a Spanish-speaking group, and they made the presentation in both language, and they did it without a teleprompt, and it was excellent. So thank you and congratulations, and we continue to support such a good cause.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Broussard? Did you perform the same duties that you always perform?
I think that's the winning thing, the way I wash the dishes.
Yes.
I believe, because I was the only English-speaking person there, so I didn't understand what was going on, so the only thing I had to do was wash the dishes.
All right, well, thank you. That concludes the opening comments from the superintendent and our winning board member. Now I'd like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. President, I move that the board enter into executive session to discuss 2 matters concerning Pat Cooper versus Lafayette Parish School Board.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We'll be back.
Test. Test 1 2.
Make a motion, we go back into regular session.
We have a motion to go back into regular session with a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are back in session. Before we, actually, let me finish this business.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that we accept council's recommendation.
All right, we have a motion that the board accept council's recommendation on the matter concerning Pat Cooper versus Lafayette Parish School Board. Madam Secretary, call for the vote.
Eight for, 1 against.
All right, motion passes. Before we get to the next item on the agenda, I'd like to take a moment to recognize a St. Thomas More High School civics class that's here joining us tonight and say welcome. Thank you for joining us. You want to wave? Hope you learn a lot. All right, next item on the agenda is 3.1 Human Resources Personnel Changes.
Mr. President, changes are attached for your review. There are no introductions tonight.
All right, do we have any? Yes, Mr. Santani.
Ms. Thibodeau, can you come to the microphone for I have a question about procedure. I promise this isn't a pop quiz. You're going to know the answer. I promise. Can you refresh or review for us the procedure for requesting transfers for teachers? So I just noticed in the personnel document that there's several transfers mid-year, and I know there's an end-of-year transfer policy or procedure. Could you just refresh for us what that is?
Well, for transfers, a teacher has to apply. And per policy, these are voluntary. We have voluntary transfers, and then we have transfers that the superintendent would call involuntary transfers. So on a voluntary transfer, a teacher will be at a school, and if they meet the requirements, they can apply and get their name on a list by March 1st. That letter has gone out to all the teachers in the district, and right now they are applying. So after they've done that, after March 1st, and after we've decided how many positions, and we look who left, who resigned, we can go to that list. That list is sent out to all the principals. So if they're interested in hiring someone that already works for us, they can look on that list and they've applied. And we verify there's some requirements. They have to have been at a school for 2 years before they can qualify for a voluntary transfer. If you see a transfer now on the list, it's usually an extenuating circumstance the superintendent has approved. It's not somebody comes to me. If somebody would come right now in the middle of the year and request a transfer, we don't, unless they have a doctor's excuse, some kind of extenuating circumstance.
So what I'm hearing is we have until March 1st for teachers to apply for a transfer without knowing which jobs will be open, right?
They don't officially know. They don't.
Sure. No, I get it. We don't know officially which jobs, or for sure which jobs will be open. That might be a better way to say it. They get on a list that says they would like to transfer as jobs, as we do staffing, at what point in time?
Well,
I know you've started, but when are the final numbers?
We're trying to get the numbers to you now, but it's all through the summer. We begin in April. You begin the preliminary, but then we have to decide where the displaced. First, we have to displace teachers. So they're overstaffed at a school before they can go and freely hire off the transfer list. We would have placed all of the displaced comes first.
So so displaced teachers come before transfer.
That's right. We have to know our holds. We have to know our openings, and then really on the transfer list, they're just treated exactly like someone coming from the outside.
Okay.
Now, principal they do like to hire, our principals like to hire off the transfer list because they've been trained by us. So,
Okay. And so finally, the jobs at Southside that are being advertised right now, I think they might have had a close date of yesterday. Who's able to apply for those?
anyone in the district right now can apply, and I'm going to sit with the principal and determine how many positions. Just because we posted them, we just wanted to see who's out there from what schools, and I'll work with her to make sure one school's not, she doesn't take so many from one school, and that we don't want to fill all of her positions, because we'd really like to fill those positions through the staff we have right now until we realize we're going to need staff. So she won't fill them all now. She and I will work gradually toward filling her positions.
Okay. Would there be, I guess we won't know about any displaced teachers before you fill those jobs at Southside, though,
I'm not going to fill all those. No, she'll have to take some displaced teachers.
Okay.
She already knows. She and I have discussed that.
Okay.
And she did last year, and she will this year.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for answering those questions.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is 4.1 BO Elementary School Project Update. Mr. Bordelon.
Good evening, members of the board. Kyle Bordelon, Director of Planning and Facilities. We have here tonight project architects for the BO Elementary School from Architects Southwest. They're going to give you a brief presentation on the status of the building plans for the project that we do plan to have go out for bidding within the next couple of weeks.
Good evening. I'm Wayne Domingue, Principal with Architects Southwest, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to give an overview of where we are on this project, where we've been on this project. As many of you know, this was a project that had a few challenges in obtaining a site, and it's been quite a lengthy effort, but thanks to efforts from the board and the City of Broussard, we've been able to secure a site at the corner of Fairfield and Marteau Road. We're pulling this project together in a very short time frame. We are ready, as Mr. Bordelon said, to go out to bids very shortly. And what I'd like to do is to take the opportunity to introduce two of the people in our firm who have done a lion's share of this work. I'd like to introduce our project manager for this project, Jeffrey Augustine, and our project architect for the project, Stephen Domingue. And I'd like to let Jeffrey give you the overview of the project.
Again, I'd like to reiterate what Wayne had said. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with you guys and gals to share our project, the Marshall Beal Elementary School. For those of you that aren't familiar with the location, you can see on the monitors to the far left of the image, the blue would be the building in the project site. It's approximately 17 acres, and the development that you see to the right of that is currently open field. Within the next couple of years, it's anticipated that this will flourish and become what we call a traditional neighborhood development. All the way to the far right would be 90 to the top is where Ambassador comes out to meet that. And there's some current plans for that area for a commercial development, which is the larger boxes that you see to the far right, in open parking area. And I think those are supposedly coming on line pretty soon. The neighborhood itself is anticipated to probably be within the next couple of years. So zooming in a little bit closer to the site, at the top of the image you see Fairfield Lane, and then to the far left is Marteau Road. The school is approximately 91,000 square feet. It's planned to be a two-story building for a couple of reasons. One is we were looking for a compact and economical structure. The other is it's an elementary school, and during preliminary planning, when we're looking at the layouts, this seemed to work best as far as travel time for the kids to go from the far reaches of the building to the cafeteria. And again, this worked out to be the most economical layout. Considering we also have a 17-acre site, we have detention requirements, which is that darker sort of green that you see towards the bottom. As far as accessing the site, off of Fairfield, there's a drive up front for approximately 10 to 11 buses. The buses would come in this area. And then off of Marteau Road to your left, You see an entrance drive to the bottom left-hand corner. We're anticipating accommodating hopefully up to 200 cars. Currently, we're showing 175. There's some negotiations or some discussions with the city of Broussard to cover a ditch along Martel Road, and if they do that, we can reduce that servitude and increase the amount of capacity for the drop-off loop. But parents bringing their students would enter the drop-off loop. It comes around up closer to where the bus drop-off is, and there's a shared canopy there. We have a large structure. In order to accommodate 200 cars on the site, we basically have a 4-lane road coming in as a drop-off. Once the students come in or the parents drop off at the drop-off canopy, which is the blue box to the top center, again, you can accommodate 4 cars wide, 4 or 5 deep. So you get a pretty good cycle for moving kids in and out and speeding things along. And then once they drop off there, they go back out to Martel Road. Preliminary discussions with the building committee was to try to encourage parents to come up Martel Road and stay away from Fairfield, again to encourage good circulation. The actual plan, this was the first floor. And what you see to the far left, the red color, is the administrative wing. You enter into the building along a long drop-off canopy, again to accommodate 10, 11 buses. And the idea is that when you enter into the building, you pass by the cafeteria, or in this case, it's a cafetorium. We don't have a standalone gym. We have a multi-purpose space for commons with a stage, and they could, in inclement weather, do some exercises inside this space as well. So once you enter into the building, there's a large corridor to the right. One of the preliminary ideas was to be able to see from the reception area all the way down to the end of the main corridor for security reasons. Speaking about security, we have an airlock up front in the vestibule for what we call a man trap. It allows people to be checked in without causing any issues with that. The purple that you see, or the light lavender, a couple of music rooms there, and then as you proceed further, the center core of the building, which is sort of that orange mustard color, is the media center. And then you have sort of the orange to the top. We've got 5 kindergarten classrooms. To the far end, we have 5 first grade and then 5 second grade. We're keeping the younger kids on the ground floor. And the core areas between that, we have a multi-purpose room. It could be a science or an art room. And then the green spaces would be the special education components. When you go up to the second floor, we've got the larger kids or older kids upstairs, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We have 5 spaces for each of those 5 classrooms. And again, a core space. The light blue or sort of turquoise color would be the science or multi-purpose spaces. And then where you see red in this case would be teacher planning, and again the green is special education. This is a rendering of what it would look like from the front bus drop-off loop. And one of the things we wanted to do as far as the exterior is provide building materials that were consistent with the future neighborhood. We wanted something that was going to be economical and durable and maintenance free. So what you're seeing here is a combination of stucco and brick. These are some vignette photos or images around the building. The top left is a view from Fairfield, the main entrance. You're looking, again, administration would be to your left, and the cafeteria, the taller space straight ahead. And then to the right, this would be a view from the kindergarten playground. And then bottom left, a view from the future T&D. And one of the things we try to do is kind of emulate the residential scale and geometries. You see some brick panels there to kind of break up the masses. And on the far right is a view from Fairfield, sort of an aerial view. This would be a view of the interior as you're entering. We have a taller space, transitional space. To the left would be the science classroom, or I'm sorry, the music classrooms. To the right would be the cafeteria. And then as you can see, you've got a clear shot all the way down to the end of the hall. Again, that was a security issue or concern. This is a view from inside the cafeteria. Again, a tall space. We have some light coming in up top to bring in some natural light. As far as the cafeteria function-wise, we talked about 20-minute intervals for kids coming in and out for lunch to accommodate. And just to back up a little bit, as far as the overall student population, the current anticipated student load is approximately 750 children. We're building in a core for 1,000. And we've done some preliminary studies of where the building could be added onto in the future. That was real important when we were laying out the site to make sure we didn't provide any obstructions for future growth. This would be a view of the media center. And I want to talk a little bit about schedule. As Wayne had indicated, this has been a very fast pace. It took us a little while to get to the site figured out or located. We've been working on this since early September. And as Colin indicated, we are anticipating going to bid within the next couple of weeks. We're anticipating a 14-month construction schedule, which would put the construction completing around the end of May, possibly early June, providing the school with about 6 months for move-in time, and fall of 2019 being the first classes. So with that, are there any questions or? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I want to ask the superintendent first of all. Didn't a committee go to I'm going to say New Iberia maybe or Abbeville or look at some wings, and I remember you talking about materials, and it was relatively less expensive than some others.
Yes, sir. We actually talked about the idea of building these wings in particular with materials that would be cost effective.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So that's we included that.
Yes, sir. These are considered to be not only economical but long-term maintenance.
Okay. And my understanding was that our goal here is to try to do what we can for our students. They're in temporary buildings, and we're going to remove some of those temporary buildings as a result of the wing. And I understand the cafeteria, because the cafeteria at the school is not designed for how many students are at the school. So I understand why you need a cafeteria. But as I was looking at the cafeteria, I have some other, but the cafeteria, it looks like the ceilings are quite high. You mentioned light to let natural light in. Have you elevated the ceiling higher than this?
Yes, it'll be a little bit higher than this, and part of that is it's a multi-purpose space. It's not only a cafeteria, but they'll be doing indoor activities for PE. It's also an auditorium. We have a stage area. So spaces like that require some additional height.
I'm sorry, I thought it was just a wing.
No, this is a brand new school.
No, sir, this is the
I stand corrected.
BO Elementary.
I'm sorry, I thought it was a wing.
Yes, sir.
My next question was why are you building an administration building for a wing?
It's a very big wing. Yeah.
That's coming. That's down the line. No more questions.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 4.2 Helical Outpost Farm to Table Initiative. Should have said Farm to Table Initiative.
That's right. Mr. President, if I might introduce Coley Franson,
sir,
with Helical Outpost LLC, and Zach McMath with the Acadiana Food Hub, who have a unique program of locally grown produce that gets served in schools that comes with an educational component as well that I think folds right into our career and technical education career track. So with that, Mr. Franson.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for having me. Thanks, everybody, for being here. My name's Coley Franson. I'm from here in Lafayette. My dad co-founded Stone Energy. I graduated in high school in '87 when we had the bumper stickers that said, "Last one out of Lafayette, turn out the lights." It was a bad time. Fast forward to about 14 years ago, I was a prosecutor down in Jefferson Parish. Principally focused in juvenile delinquency. That's where they start you, in Jefferson. It was the most rewarding thing I ever saw. What we really saw was a lot of very talented kids who would come through. We had a recidivism rate of about 90%. These kids were talented. Most of them were coming to us from public schools. At the time, whenever there was a school fight in the hallway or something at the bus stop, the way that was handled typically was the officer on duty at the school would send them to us. We were the disciplinarians. It's how it kind of worked. And ultimately what we saw was a lot of kids that would come through that were extremely talented. They could do fractions in their head. They could convert grams to ounces. They could use a triple beam scale. They understood time value of money. They understood marketing. They understood inventory management. The problem was they didn't have a legitimate crop. So, you know, one of the things that we saw was through programs like Jefferson Parish Marine Institute, which is part of AMI, the American Marine Institute, kids that would get skilled in educated so they could get their skills in welding and plumbing, things like that. They wouldn't come back to us. They were not in the 90% that would come back. And what was very profoundly important at the time for us was we used to always joke, as long as we have a summer, we have job security in the juvenile prosecutor's office, because that's where 90% of our trouble came from. So you know, that was always fascinating to me, because I kept thinking if there's a way that we can address kids who really can do a lot of great things, they just don't have good options, then we can do some neat impacts and outcomes. 2005, April 29th, we evacuated with 4 kids to Crowley, Louisiana. We thought it would be a 3-day weekend. We're here 13 years later because we lost everything in New Orleans. And it was very important to me at that time. It was the first time I'd seen resources get shut down. No access to food, no access to money. A lot of people with their ATMs at Whitney Bank, they had their backup stuff in the basement. So you had nothing. A few years ago, all of this stuff's in the back of my mind as I was practicing law, and an opportunity presented to repatriate and employ returning combat veterans into ag jobs. And what was proposed to me was we can get folks back as they transition out of military and get them into agricultural jobs and get them into a vocational path rather than benefits. And basically my response to them was, hey, great guys, awesome. My problem is my wife's from Crowley. Her grandfather was a rice farmer, and I don't believe you can train people how to farm. So the response at the time was, we have a 6-week program in Southern California that transitioning service personnel go through. And I said, good, sign me up for that. I want to see that. And in that process, what my takeaway was, and why I've now become an accidental farmer rather than an attorney, is what I realized was only 3% of our population's in agricultural jobs. And the average age of farmers is 59 and rising. So if you extrapolate those graphs, 20 years, who's coming up to farm? You know, that to me was an aha moment. The other aha moment was 80 to 90% of our produce comes from California or Mexico. It's really Mexico, where it gets shipped to California, gets shredded in big factories, and it gets trucked here or anywhere. And your nutritionists go crazy because they don't know where it's coming from, right? Because it's now come from all these different farms and sources. It gets shredded in a factory, put on a truck, driven here, dropped off, and it has about 3 days of life till it turns brown and wilts, you know, and you have no accountability and transparency on what it is you're eating. All you can trust is labels, you know. So that was really where what really threw me into this whole process was we have to fix that. And it's not necessarily a veteran issue, it's our kids, because there is nobody coming up behind the current farmers. So with that, that's my background. And I'll just have just a couple of slides. And I did, because this is school related, I did bring some show and tell items, because I'm a big fan of visual aids, you know, so thank you for playing along. What we did here, and this is a project that's right around the corner from us at John Paul DeGrade Academy. What my takeaway was from the training I went through was this can absolutely work. We can achieve the functional equivalent of 3 acres of produce out of 2,880 square feet. We can grow at 90% less water than conventional farming, and we can also do it with 90% less land. I'm doing 52 harvests a year, every week, and I'm reseeding every week. The other side of that that's very important to me is I've also got, as I mentioned, 4 kids. They're all teenagers. If you're going to teach agriculture to a teenager, it has to be at least as sexy as Snapchat, okay? It's very hard to do that with growing when you have to throw some seeds down. You're going to fight some worms and some weeds and some bugs. So the reality is what we were learning was hydroponic agriculture, which we really loved. I did. And my approach to it was, hey, this is all great, but you guys out there in California, you need to think about it like we think about it in the oil field. This needs to be something that's standardized. It can be trained quickly, deployed quickly. It can be taken down and removed quickly and set up somewhere else if you have to do it. And that hadn't been done before. So we did that here in Lafayette. We integrated equipment that's made in California, but we worked with our current local oil field to integrate what you see here. The upper image in the upper left, that's at John Paul the Great Academy. That one right below it with the pink light, that's in Virginia, because we wanted to show that we can run through different climates. So it was important to us that we can go through 40-inch rainstorms and 40-inch snowstorms and come away with the same produce. Incidentally, this stuff that's here, that you're looking at in these pictures, that's what we grow every week. So we do edible flowers. We have tomatoes. We're doing a whole bunch of microgreens, and I'll get to that in a second. This is the part that really is why I gave up law. This is where the rubber meets the road. We have to get growing to the next generation. So what we did here was we started with no textbooks, no curriculum. We started working at a coeducational independent school that is pre-K through grade 12. And we got kids who really didn't want to be in the dirt, but they loved hydroponics because it's, like I said, it's every week. You're having outcomes and impacts. You can see these things grow, and there's always something to do. So in our case, what we've got to work with was these kids that suddenly had no idea how to grow anything. 6 weeks later, when we had our first harvest, we started in February of 2014. By May, we were selling to farmers markets, and then over time, we've now advanced, because in the process, what we've learned is to really make something work for these kids, we would really have to have a way for them to advance those skills and what they can learn in the classroom and actually have a way to go for summer jobs, after school jobs, or maybe after high school jobs if these kids are not on a path to go to college. So what we did here over the last couple of years, we've been working quietly but efficiently to establish market value for a produce that we can grow locally, and that's food safe. It's part of what I really liked about growing in greenhouses is we can really control what happens to this product. So if a bird flies overhead and it poops on a crop, that's a really bad thing, right? You're sharing bacteria. So from a food safety perspective, if animals and things are creeping into your crops, it's a bad thing. Or people. If they're sick, like we've got this flu epidemic going around, if you can't control who's accessing this food, you're exposing it to potential pathogens and particulates. So what we did here, really through local support, through the local support of our restaurants, that were really tired of getting stuff off of trucks that only lasted a few days. They really saw the benefit in us coming locally and doing what we're doing right now. I brought some little samples here just for laughs and grins. This is a product called Frisee. We grow this for Pamplona. Pamplona came to us and said, hey, can you do this? Because whatever we're sourcing is wilted when we get it off the truck. So we're doing that right now per order for them. The other things that we're growing here are items that's a red lettuce and we do all of this stuff living with the roots on. And it's a very important thing as well because this lettuce has a shelf life of weeks, not days. So it's still alive. This lettuce was on a table this afternoon at 2 o'clock when we were harvesting. So everything that you're seeing here was fresh off the table today. The other thing that we're doing here is we have 120 tomato vines, and once a year we decide to try different varieties. Rather than throw the vines away, we clip the tops off, we root them. So in this case, you've got little roots, and we give those away to all of our local growers as a community service effort, so that instead of throwing this value away, these indeterminate crops can come back and be 20 feet long again with a nice output that the local growers don't have to buy seeds and may not know they won't germinate. In this case, you know you've got a healthy vine, so why throw it away? Let's create that kind of value. And then the other things that we do are microgreens. This is a microgreen, young crops. And we're very excited about all of these efforts. This one's also basil. We're really excited about basil because it's living. Again, if you go to Bread and Circus, Manny over there puts these on the table instead of flowers. So if you get your pizza, you can just tear off your basil and throw it on, and it's really neat because it's fresh. And we're also excited, the last thing I'll say with all of this is the efforts that we've been taking and the baby steps that we're making to try to get to the kids who are our next generation of growers. You know, like it or not, in about 20 years, unless technology changes, we're all going to be in elder care somewhere. So where's our food going to come from? So long story short, we're also excited about the whole thing is what I saw back in juvenile was a lot of the kids didn't have access to healthy food. We saw a very common intersection of access to food, and usually where there's a food desert, there's a Wi-Fi desert. So these kids are going home hungry, and they don't have access to the tools they need to do their homework at night, so they end up having to go to a McDonald's or something to get access to the internet, so they're eating McDonald's. And not that that's a bad thing, McDonald's, but every day, not necessarily a good thing. So the other thing I would just point out is from a food equity point of view, what we're very excited about doing is working with the schools, because what a lot of people don't know, y'all probably know, is a lot of these schools have school pantry programs that can allow kids that are food insecure to go home with food that's healthy. And for us, that's a very big deal, is having food equity. So what we're trying to achieve long term in this community is taking a reliable process of growing that's high volume, high yield, and train that to kids that can grow up, starting in primary school, through secondary, high school, and on into college if they want to, or not, if they want to go into private industry. And lastly, all of the things I just showed you about growing and selling and teaching, what we're looking to do now that we're very excited about is to start rolling out into Lafayette in a more broad fashion to start having these impacts and outcomes where we can start working with the kids, teaching them the skills so that now they can have a path to a viable vocational path that right now doesn't exist in many ways. One of the things that I will share anecdotally, and I have to do my own homework on it, is that typically those kids today that are interested in agriculture are on a path to welding. That was mind-blowing to me. You know, why are we, if you're interested in ag, why are you learning welding? And a lot of that, as I've been given to understand, has to do with, well, where's your marketable skill? You know, where's your career? Well, the thought is, well, if you learn welding, you can work on your cattle guard or work on your tractor. Well, the reality is, if you're going to work on your combine, John Deere's going to void your lease and your warranties. So what is that skill going to get you? And the reality is, a lot of these jobs are going to LNG plants that are in another parish. And to me, I'm thinking, well, heck, we're investing our skills, our time, our treasure, our talent in this parish into getting kids skilled that may go to another parish to create that value over there. Anyway, what I'm excited about here today are the impacts and outcomes that we can make not only in the classroom, but out of the classroom. And I'm excited to end, if you'll notice on this slide here, our goal is to start on the left side with STEM and learning job, or summer jobs, that sort of thing. And as kids grow up through primary, high school, they may graduate, and if they want to go into farming, they're set up in a way that they can be supported by a local network that's already established that can help them advance their cause and keep their talent here locally. That ultimately gets us away from the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability where we don't know what we're eating. Now we know exactly what we're eating. So with all of that too, I end because if you notice here, in the center of that slide is Acadiana Food Hub. And I will leave you with this before I turn it over to Zach, which is here, if I want to produce right there at John Pellegret Academy, if I want to go to Social Restaurant where we produce, I would have to drive my produce at less than 41 degrees over to O'Neill Lane, drop that off in Baton Rouge for another truck to bring it back to Social from Baton Rouge at less than 41 degrees, where at that point you have wilt, you get it beat up, and it would cost 30% more. So as I'm working through how are we going to get these kids skilled to where they can have jobs, it became very apparent to me that we have to work with our local food hubs and our local distribution system. And I was very excited to start working here with Zach because they come from a background of M&M sales, decades of food distribution, production, and I would do a disservice to say any more about that other than we're very excited to bring together now a way to close loops that can now give us a path to bring this food all around the community and beyond. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Zach for a few minutes. And thank you for your time. I think you said 5 minutes. That's a long 5 minutes. I'm very grateful.
Real quick. Thank you all. I'm Zach McMath. I'm the president of the Acadiana Food Hub. And what the Acadiana Food Hub really is just an infrastructure and the ability to connect farmers with larger markets. And so what we found is that, like Coley said, local farmers have to go at least to Baton Rouge just to come back to even our own school systems, which increases the prices of that produce. So if we can keep that local, if we can take out that 30 to 60% increase in price, then we can actually distribute these products locally for a lower price, which gets the school system a better cost, right? We're not putting in more middlemen. So we created the Acadiana Food Hub that is contracted out with a number of distributors, access to these schools, and our ability to actually get those small farmers, the dozens of Coleys out there with all of their different types of produce, into our school systems without having to inflate this cost. And that was really the purpose of our nonprofit, was to connect farmers with markets. And I can't think of a better option for a local farmer than our school systems. And really, the way Coley's put this together with a curriculum that helps our kids know where their food comes from, and we're finding that they actually eat the food that they know what it is. Right? They're eating an eggplant because they know what an eggplant is now. So kind of creating that access and again, putting it together in a way that's affordable for everybody is really why we're here. And so we're excited that we have farmers now that are actually coming up, because 2 years ago we didn't have a lot of farmers that were in a place to be able to, for you to safely get them as a school system, because food safety is an extremely important thing. So now with these kind of operations, we can actually get this product to the school systems for a much lower rate, higher quality product than we ever really could before, without having, and by setting up a nonprofit, we're not having to really make a whole lot of money in distributing produce. I mean, I think that's the point. It keeps more money in the farmer's pocket, and it keeps the price low for the school system. So we're excited to make that available for y'all, and we'll see how it goes.
Great.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Any questions? Good? I think so.
All right, now we're going to move on to our consent agenda. For the students, this is the business part of the meeting. I'm going to read the agenda item. School board members have an opportunity to pull those items for further discussion. At the end of this, the items that were not pulled, we're going to do one vote on, and those will either pass or fail as one big group. And then we'll go back to look at the items that the school board members pulled. And right now I'm going to read the agenda items. 5.1, approval of Resolution 0218-1926, expressing support for the Louisiana Checkbook Coalition. 5.2, approval of Resolution 0218-1923.
Pull that, please. Oh, I'm sorry. You wouldn't
Thank you. 5.3, approval of revised ELL coach job description. Ms. Morris. 5.4, approval of Karen Crow Middle School's Informatics Academy Cost Center. 5.5, approval of Westside Elementary French Immersion Expansion. 5.6, approval of Judy's Middle School's Business Academy Cost Center. 5.7, approval of LPSS 2017-2018 Pupil Progression Plan. 5.8, approval of Charles Burke Elementary School's Two-Way Immersion Cost Center. 5.9, approval of an increase to the Northside High Health Academy Cost Center. 5.10, Resolution 0218-1922 Career and Technical Education Month.
Pull that, please.
5.11, delegating medication administration during life-threatening situations.
You pull that one.
5.12, spot rezone Lafayette High School to Northside High School.
You pull that one.
5.13, spot rezone S.J. Montgomery to Westside. 5.14, spot rezone Evangeline Elementary to Live Oak.
You pull that one.
5.15, job description revision food service warehouse coordinator. 5.16, budget revision to capital improvements fund for unforeseen HVAC expenses. 5.17, budget revision for self-funded construction fund for Acadiana High front drive paving replacement. 5.18, architect selection of 6 wing additions renovation projects and 20 playground pavilion projects. 5.19, approval of increase to HVAC maintenance contract with Bernhard Mechanical. 5.20, sales tax collection report for December 2017. 521, purchase of building for office consolidation to accommodate increase in classroom capacity. 522, project listing bonds and pay-as-you-go. 523, grant fund summary January 2018. 524, resolution 0218-1924, ratification of bond sale. 525, review of budget recap and timeline. 526, budget to actual reports January 2018. 527, extension of lease terms, section 16, Ridge. 528, approval bid award elementary and middle school robotics bid number 5518. 529, amendment to lease for section 16 property Ambassador and Ridge, Old Logan site. 530, pay for performance stipend.
Pull that, please.
Pull that one.
531, contracts for principals and non-principal administrators. 532, emerging classroom teacher job description. 533, resolution 0218-1925, teacher shortage. 534, policy EGD, casualty insurance. 535, policy BC, meetings. 536, policy BBC, board committees. 537, policy BCBB, notification of school board meetings. 538, satellite bus transportation, French immersion. 539, satellite bus transportation, health careers academies.
Pull that one.
Can we pull 38, please?
Yes. 539, approval of minutes. So, Madam Secretary, just as a recap, I've got 5-2, 5-3, 5-10, 11, 12, 5-14, 5-30, 5-34, 5-38, and 5-39 is pulled.
Mr. President, I move that we approve all items not pulled.
Second.
We have a motion to approve all items not pulled and a second. Madam Secretary, is there any public comment on that? Any board member comment on that? Mr. Santani.
I just wanted to point out, Mr. Kinesic, there are a couple items on the agenda, in this consent agenda that I think dovetail nicely. The first one was the resolution that I put on endorsing the Louisiana Checkbook Coalition. For those who don't know, the Checkbook Coalition is a group of organizations statewide who are lobbying the state government to create an easy-to-use website where you can search and view financial information from the state of Louisiana. This means what people make, what individual transactions, checks that get sent to vendors, what your state government is spending, and at the same time allow local governments to participate in that as well. So for instance, the Lafayette Parish School Board would be able to send our daily financial transaction data to the state of Louisiana. It would be added to this website for you, the citizens of Lafayette Parish, to easily look and see what it is we're spending your tax money on to educate the children of the parish. And I thought this was very important because one of the lessons we learned in 2017 was that there was not quite the fiscal trust between the school board and the taxpayer of Lafayette Parish. And I hope the checkbook, if it comes to reality, will be a useful tool not only for the citizens wanting to know how their tax dollars are spent, but also for the policymakers at the school board level, the city council level, at the state level, whose fiscal decisions must be based on facts. You know, we all hear a lot of rhetoric and a lot of talking points when we talk about fiscal responsibility at any level of government, but it has to be based on facts. And making the government spending at all levels available online will lead to more sound budgetary decisions, and more importantly, to a more informed public, because we can sit here and tell you we have our budget online and you can come to budget meetings, but I'm not so naive to know that those are exceptionally boring and difficult to navigate documents and meetings. And it's very easy to sit at home and get on a website and type in Justin Santani, what does he make? And come up that after taxes I get a check for $711 every month. It's not quite the windfall that some people would have you think. But it'll be right there in black and white, and you won't just have to take my word for it. There'll be financial information. So I think the bottom line here is that the truth generates trust, and math never lies. And following the checkbook is another item on this consent agenda where we sold $65 million worth of bonds. And if you go and read the resolution and read the budget document for the projects and how we're financing it, it's exceptionally, to use Dr. Chasson's favorite word, esoteric. There you go. It's difficult to understand right away if you haven't read government bond sale reports before. And so I bring that up to say, if we have the checkbook, then there will be a transaction. And you'll be able to see exactly what it is. You'll be able to see $65 million come in from a bond sale. And you'll be able to see $100,000 for desks go out because we built a wing and we need new desks. And we paid for this and we paid for that and we paid for this. So I hope these things here help demonstrate just a small bit that the Lafayette Parish School Board is serious about earning the trust of the taxpayers of Lafayette Parish. And we welcome any and all questions and inquiries when it comes to our fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other board member comments? And for the public, I did go through that fairly quickly. If there's anybody in the public right now that has any comment on any item on the consent agenda that we did not pull, this is your time. Okay. Now, just to back to the board, any other comments on the consent agenda? All right, Madam Secretary, I call for the vote. Did you vote?
Nine for, none against.
All right, motion passes on the consent agenda. The first item pulled is 5.2, approval of resolution 02181923, National School Counselors Week. Mr. Hidalgo.
Yes. Reason that I pulled that was the purpose of having it read out loud. And here in a minute, I'll ask Ms. Samick to do that for us. With that said, I'd make a motion that the board approve resolution 02181923, National School Counselors Week.
I have a motion by Mr. Hidalgo and a second by Mr. Angel for the approval of resolution 02181923. Do we have any public excuse me? Do we have any public comment on this motion to approve this resolution? Okay, we'll let her read it and then we'll ask you again.
Thank you very much. Resolution 2181923, National School Counseling Week. Whereas school counselors are employed in public and private schools to help students reach their full potential, and whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development, and whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children, and whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves, and whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society, and whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school, therefore be it duly resolved that the Lafayette Parish School Board does hereby designate the week of February 5 through 9, 2018 as National School Counseling Week. And I would like to personally thank our professional school counselors and our district student service staff and coordinators, Pauline Duplantis and Tanya Hebert. And thanks to their efforts last week, we had over 300 families attend a financial aid workshop that it was a huge benefit to the families and to the students. And also thank you to all of our counselors for supporting our students' educational and emotional needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment now that that's been read? Any board member comment? And I'd just like to say to all our counselors out there, thank you, because I can tell you, the Lafayette Parish counselors steered me on my path, and without their guidance, I don't know where I'd be today. But our counselors go, do everything from literally saving lives and putting students on the right path emotionally to putting them on the right path for their educational career. So thank you. With that, Madam Secretary, I'd like to call for the vote for 5.2.
Eight for, none against.
All right, motion passes 5.2. So next item is 5.3, approval of the revised ELL coach job description. Ms. Morris.
All right, can someone make a motion?
We have a motion to approve the revised ELL coach job description by Mr. Hidalgo and a second by Mr. Angel. Is there any public comment on this motion to approve the revised ELL coach job description? Any board member comment on this item?
Okay. I have a whole list of questions because I'm a little confused. All right, so I went back and looked at the agenda item also from December 13th as well as this one. So I guess my first question, it's more a point of clarification. It's my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, please, Ms. Samick. This is a grant that ULL wrote, and then once it received the grant, it later entered into an agreement with LPSS, or was it a joint grant?
It was a joint grant.
Okay. Was there at some point an agreement or a contract between ULL and LPSS that was signed separately from the grant documents?
We're developing a memorandum of understanding.
Okay. That's still being developed, but
Yes,
it hasn't been completed yet. Okay. So explain to me, in the current agenda item, it says it was discovered that it didn't meet the requirements of the ULL grant. What happened?
We wrote the job description without having Michelle Haas-Broussard present at the table in writing the job description. We tried to write it where it was aligned with an instructional content coach job description. And after it was approved and we started the process for advertisement, we just realized it was not going to fulfill the responsibilities as outlined in the ETC grant.
Did you have a copy of the grant documents with you when you did the first version of the job description?
I did.
All right. And then I know we typically ask this with job descriptions. Once the first one was written, was it with the grant document given to our attorneys to look through to make sure everything met the requirements of the grant? I'm just trying to figure out how this seemed to have fallen through a huge crack.
Yeah, I take full responsibility for it. I did send it to Suzanne to review, and as I said, we worked off of the instructional content coach job description, and it just wasn't an appropriate.
Right, because there was a contract or a grant agreement that
yes, ma'am,
dictated it. Okay. And then looking over the new, I wouldn't really consider it a revised job description because the responsibilities are completely different. So it's more, to me, it's a new job description, but in any case, it seems to be very heavily ELL oriented.
It is.
So I'm just curious, was Janie Ellison part of the discussions about either the involvement in the grant or the job description, or I mean, I know that Ms. Trahan is director of the immersion and language programs, but then Janie Ellison has the ELL component. So I hope that there was some collaboration between all of the departments in reaching to the point where we are now.
And I would have to defer to Tia LeBrun to see if Janie was part of the first collaboration. Definitely she was part of this collaboration.
With the corrected?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's all I have.
Any other board member comments on this item? All right, Madam Secretary, I'd like to call for the vote for 5.3.
8-4, none against.
All right, next item on the agenda is 5.10, Resolution 0218-1922, Career and Technical Education Month.
Mr. President, I pulled that one for the same reason. I would like to have it read out loud. I'll ask Ms. Samick to do that here in a moment. For now, with that said, I'd like to move that the Board approve Resolution 0218-1922, Career and Technical Education Month.
A second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Hidalgo and a second by Ms. Morrison for the approval of Resolution 0218-1922, Career and Technical Education Month. I'm going to ask Ms. Samick to read the resolution, and then I'll call for public comment.
Thank you. Resolution 218-1922, whereas February 1 through 28, 2018 has been designated Career and Technical Education Month by the Association for Career and Technical Education, and whereas the theme for Career and Technical Education Month is Celebrate Today and Own Tomorrow, and whereas Career and Technical Education offers students the opportunity to gain the academic, technical, and employability skills necessary for true career readiness, and whereas Career and Technical Education provides students with career exploration opportunities early in their educational experience, which enables them to make informed and beneficial decisions about their academic coursework and pursue established programs of study and career pathways, and whereas Career and Technical Education prepares students for these and other fulfilling careers by offering integrated programs of study that link secondary and post-secondary education and lead to the attainment of industry-recognized credentials, and whereas ensuring that employers have access to a qualified workforce is a crucial step in ensuring productivity among the business and industry communities, as well as continued American academic growth and global competitiveness, and whereas the Smith-Hughes Act, the first act of Congress to provide funding for career and technical education, was signed into law 101 years ago and allows us to celebrate how far CTE has come to become a powerhouse of America's economy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Lafayette Parish School Board does hereby proclaim February 1st through 28th, 2018 as Career and Technical Education Month. Mr. Kniezek asked me that we have a couple students speak about the impact CTE has had on their lives. Director Ms. Olivier could not be here tonight. I would like to introduce Shonda Brooks, CTE Resource and Development Coordinator. She would like to introduce herself as well as the guest she has with her tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and of course, good evening, board. My name is Shonda Brooks, and I'm the Career and Resource Development Coordinator for CTE. And in celebration of CTE Month, we do have two current students with the district who are here to discuss how the district CTE program has impacted their education. First, we will hear from Vance Stokely, who is a student at Lafayette High School, and then we will hear from Ruth Adams, who's a student at Como High School. Vance.
Good evening. I want to thank all of you for inviting me to this meeting. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. My presentation will be brief, but over the course of my span at Lafayette High, I've received two certifications in food processing and safe food handling certificate, and them qualifications have led me to be able to get a job at Dino South as a prep cook. So overall, the certifications have helped me throughout my course of being at Dino's. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ruth Adams. I'm from Como High School, and I'm with Team 3616. In the 21st century, students need to explore, experience, and understand the world around them in different ways as compared to 50, 20, or even 10 years ago. Learning can virtually take place now with the touch of a screen. With access to an infinite amount of information, the newer generation is pushing forward at faster rates. However, Despite an infinite amount of knowledge accessible to students, it is important that the younger generation receive key skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. Some of our past alumni state that employers are quick to say that they possess the ability to learn quickly, process information accurately, and use information in decision making. Many of our members that begin on the robotics team that have both graduated from college or went directly into the workforce have already been promoted. Many employers are not just interested in educational background, but in the student's level of critical thinking and job skills. The growing demands of programming, mechanical, electrical, technology, robotics, CAD design, media, and speaking skills are becoming an importance at the secondary level for job readiness for future generations of workers. Students with the skills mentioned above are highly valued and highly sought after by employers. It is very much appreciated that Lafayette Parish school system has recognized to adjust the curriculum. Yes, thank you. And the schools to offer courses that encourage students to think outside the box, or like we say in robotics, to think outside the box. In conclusion, students that can develop 21st century skills would be more likely to have an advantage in their professional career. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. I think we have one question. Before you guys go down, I think we have one question for Ms. Morris.
Mr. Vance, can you come up to the microphone so I can put you on the spot for a second?
Okay.
Did you, right here, did you hear the presentation by the Helical Farm to Table?
Mm-hmm.
So with the programs you've taken with the ProServe, is that something you'd be interested in learning more about, the hydroponics?
Some sort of it. Like, I don't know, I kind of like cooking, but yeah, I would definitely love being a farmer or
So an internship or something to learn about the farm to table or hydroponic aspect of it?
Oh yeah, that'd be really cool.
Okay. Well, maybe we can work on, with our CTE director, setting up some type of a summer program or something with Helical.
All right. I think we have a couple more questions. Mr. Angel?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment to both of the young students. We have a saying in French, des fois les meilleurs discours c'est les plus courts. And it translated, it means oftentimes the best speech is the shortest speech. And you two gave examples of that tonight, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Next item on the agenda is 511, delegating medication administration during life-threatening situations. Do we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. We need to approve the resolution 0218-1922. Do we have any public comment on that resolution? Or any more board member comment? All right. Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote for 510.
Eight, 4, none against.
All right, now 511, delegating medication administration during life-threatening situations. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
A motion to approve
Second.
by Dr. Chasson and a second by Ms. Morrison for 511, delegating medication administration during life-threatening situations. Do we have any public comment on this item? Okay, no public comment. Any board member comment on this item?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Chasson.
About probably 3 questions. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to go first,
Ms.
Mr.
Morris.
President, if that's okay. So I have a question. I'm not sure who put this item on the agenda. The recommended action is to approve the statement from the Louisiana State Board of Nursing. But when you read through the statement, there is a concept in there that says each local educational authority will establish guidelines. So my question is the intent of this item to adopt this as the guidelines for this particular medication administration? There's a difference between approving this, and I'm not sure why we need to approve it. It's a state board that's already adopted it. So are we really trying to adopt this as the guidelines for our school nurses?
I would like to defer to Dr. Wilson with the Karen Crow Health Clinic, is a major sponsor.
Sorry, I'm stiff from sitting down there. I'm Dr. DJ Wilson. I'm actually your medical director, donated to y'all by the Lafayette General Foundation, so I get the privilege of working with y'all in my later years. And it's been a little bit of an issue because there was a discrepancy between the state law. It was state law that emergency medicines can be delegated within the school system. It's a safety issue because the school nurse can't be there at every place at all times. They get sick. They have kids too, even if they're assigned to that school. And the nursing board had actually, a number of years ago, said unofficially, but once it's even in writing, it's a problem. Can they delegate it? Because every other prior emergency medication had been specifically acknowledged by the nursing board. And then it comes to Sayu-Cortef, and they said no. And you go, oh my gosh, of all the least risky one and one of the ones that is most important. So we've spent several years trying to get them to acknowledge so that we do not have the discrepancy, and they did. And they went even farther and said, not only that, you don't have to keep coming to us for approval of every last medication that is for a life-threatening situation. There's already another one on the horizon that schools are having to deal with. As soon as they made this, they were busy doing it. Our students will have varying needs over time, and we need to be able to provide for those medical needs in the least restrictive environment that we can. We would like all students to participate to the fullest extent possible and put the least amount of restrictions, but we want to make it safe. And anyway, so we were trying not to do this in a secretive manner and letting y'all know what it was. And I was told that it needed to come to the board, and it went through the administration and went up to the board. Is that correct? It is not the policy. Every single medication administration has a protocol, whether they're pills that have to be given, whether they are for the rectal diazepam. There's actually whole teams for epinephrine. There is going to be developed one for Sayu-Cortef, but this is the nursing guidelines on what we are supposed to do to be able to do it. So I'm sorry if it wasn't precisely worded. We don't have to approve the Louisiana State Nursing Board's actions.
So, Dr. Wilson, I'm the nurse on the board, and this is the pharmacist on the board.
Cool. We got a pharmacist on the board for.
But my question was much simpler than that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's simply that the guideline from the Board of Nursing says that the schools will adopt a guideline or develop guidelines, but we're only being asked tonight to approve what the nursing board said, and there's a difference to me between just approving this or making this our official guidelines.
It isn't the official guidelines because we have to, and every medication has different guidelines, and we revisit them regularly.
So will you be coming back to the board for us to approve the standard guidelines? Or okay.
Never have before, but
whatever
then
Ms. Morris.
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
I believe the language that you're looking for is in the recommended action. So if you
it says to approve. That's why I just want to clarify that
yes,
these are not the guidelines like Dr. Wilson said. I want to make sure that's very clear. That some nurse that works for the school system doesn't go administer Sayu-Cortef or train an unlicensed person to administer it, which is what this is saying. And then we come back and say, well, you couldn't do that because we don't have any guidelines in place. Okay, I mean we have to make sure we're protecting our licensed personnel and their licenses as well with what we're doing. So I just want to make sure it's crystal clear that these are not the guidelines, that this is simply adopting or approving or acknowledging what the State Board of Nursing and BESC have done jointly.
The State Board of Nursing wanted to make it very, very clear that all medications need to go through and are the responsibility of the RN to be sure that everybody is trained, everybody has competency on an individual level for what they are expected to do for every assigned task. That's what the guidelines are from the nursing board, but the specific training protocols that they have to go through are they are yet to be finalized. They're in the development stage, and we revise them. I actually haven't had to come up with a new one because they existed for the other drugs, but we do have to revisit them, and I've always been consulted when we revisit them to make sure there's no changes or concerns. Does that closer to answer your question?
Yeah, it's clarified that these are not the guidelines. Thank
I'm
you.
sorry that I didn't understand.
Okay, Dr. Chasson? Ms. Boot.
The board has a policy. It's policy JGCD. It's called Administration of Medication. If I had, it's very long. It's 11 pages. If I had to guess, it's probably similar to lots of boards' policies, which means it's not very good, and it's not very updated. The last time it was revised was October 2015, but Dawn, when you get a chance to look at it, that's where what you're looking for probably is, and it's probably outdated.
So we probably need to get that updated.
Okay.
Consistent with what is on the agenda right now.
All right, Dr. Chasson.
Man, 2015, that's a long ways away. I was in my early 30s when that was. My first question is, so a licensed RN will train the unlicensed staff. So what training will a licensed RN go through? Or what entity? Will it be Lords that handles the training?
No. No. We're going to choose, and it depends on the medication done. So for this one, we're looking at an understanding first of what the underlying disease conditions are that cause this. And what symptoms are. Then how to administer the medication, how to fix it, do it, get it. There's a protocol. You have to call 911 for all emergency medications. There's we have to follow the doctor's orders. Every emergency medication has a specific doctor's orders under which circumstances the medications are to be given. And they vary slightly from child to child.
Okay, so let me ask you this quick question, or if anybody can chime in. So for instance, there's a decision to be made. So based upon said disease state, whatever indications or usage that it falls under, such as allergic, ophthalmic, whatever that may be, will the guidelines help the person identify that I need to go with Solu-Cortef before I go with epinephrine?
Oh, you don't have that choice ever. Okay. I suppose that there could be a student that has allergic reactions too, but they're gonna list the physician. The student's physician fills out a medication order. And that lists what it is being given for, why it's being given, under what circumstances it's being given. And certain ones like the Diastat have in emergency medicines, they have more information put on them and places to put information, just like the ones for the diabetes have more places to put things in it, although most of the endocrinologists have their own format that they use to put their information in. And we have to follow that for each individual student. So the TUP, the trained unlicensed personnel, is trained both for the disease process in general, the medication specifically, but also for that individual student. And for things like field trips and all medications, including even the pills that have to be administered or might have to be administered during a field trip, the nurse is notified of the field trip in advance and who's going on it, so they actually review with the TUPs that will be attending that what needs to be done and who needs to get what.
Okay.
Does that?
Yes, ma'am.
Is
Yes,
that
no,
real
absolutely.
specific?
Yes, ma'am. Like, absolutely. You're amazing.
No, and I don't even come up with all of the details. I just have to review the most of the final products. But all the nurses have input into each of the protocols. And if there's enough questions, if there's questions and things that come up, we'll even sit there and revise them. So they're considered, are they policies or guidelines? Anyway, something, they're available in the online.
Yes, ma'am.
But they're not in the main, there's a difference between policies and guidelines, and I don't understand which is which. One of them requires y'all to approve it.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know which one that is. Is policies. Okay, ours are guidelines.
And then let me ask this last question. So a possible contraindication, obviously doctor prescribed Solu-Cortef for the patient. Patient brings it to school.
No, parent checks it in with the school nurse.
Okay. So at that point, obviously, that you would assume most doctors would have a complete medical background of said patient. But let's say it's a new patient that went to the pediatric group. They don't identify the kid, or the parents. Obviously, I don't expect the kid to say that at the age of 3 or 4. I had tons of bruises, and they brought me to the doctor. They diagnosed me with like idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. So with that being a major contraindication of Solu-Cortef,
the indications for Solu-Cortef are generally adrenal insufficiency.
Okay.
As an emergency use of the medication.
Right. Oh no.
So,
with that being a major contraindication, the ITP.
No, not if they have adrenal insufficiency.
Right.
Because if they're having any stressor, they cannot really react to it normally. They don't make it, or don't make it adequately.
Well, no. What I'm saying is with Solu-Cortef, and if you've ever dealt with ITP, then my question is.
And sometimes they do use steroids with ITP. But that's what a doctor has to determine. But if you are adrenal insufficient, you're not going to be able to deal with those episodes. But you're talking about the corticosteroids as opposed to more the mineralocorticosteroids.
Yes,
but they have these people have an absolute
definite need for it.
Insufficiency for it. It's not adrenal suppression produced by medications.
Okay.
It is sometimes pituitary tumors, but there's also congenital adrenal hyperplasia.
Hey, Dr. Chasson, this is a little deeper than I think we need to get
Oh,
into.
pardon moi. I'm sorry. I'll talk to you later. I'll stay.
I feel like I've got a master's in pharmacology.
The exam. Yeah, when is the
there's
exam?
a discrepancy, just in general, when there's discrepancy between an order that the nurse has received, which most often comes up with more complicated things like diabetics, if there's something that's not right, or we go, well, we can't do this, or we don't do that, wait, no. It goes up through the chain, it goes through the nursing supervisor. She says, hey, doc, I need you to look at this. And do you need to call the doc and have it clarified? Do you need, because she likes to do doc to doc?
Right.
Or what do you think about this? So
Okay. I
there's,
just didn't want to take
that's
a risk
why.
for those
That's
licensed
why.
RNs.
They
Okay.
don't automatically just do everything. These people question a lot.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's their job, and that's what the nursing board said they need to do. Make sure they got it down.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you,
Ms.
ma'am.
Morris, do you want to?
Oh, no, ma'am.
Still
No,
want to
ma'am.
second
That's
this,
something I definitely
even
needed to
though
know.
Your comments indicated that you still do. Okay. So we have a motion. We have a second. We have comments from the public on this, and we have board member comments. Is there any other comment? All right, Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote. What about the flux capacitor?
I swear I'm going to explain the time value of money next time.
Eight, 4, none against.
All right, motion passes. Next item, 514, spot rezone event. I'm sorry, excuse me, 512, spot rezone Lafayette High School to Northside High School. Entertain a motion.
Good to go. I'd like to make a motion to postpone.
We have a motion to postpone from Dr. Chasson.
I'll second. Mr. Broussard.
Mr. Broussard seconds. Do we have any comment on the motion to postpone the spot rezone Lafayette High to Northside High School from the public? Do we have any? Okay, we don't have any comment from the public. Do we have any board member comment on the motion to postpone the spot rezone from Lafayette High to Northside High? Any board members want to comment on this?
I do. I have several questions, some of which will involve Ms. Samick, but she has left. Is she coming back?
She's available.
Oh, she's back there. Okay. They're not all for her, but some of them will be. The motion on the floor is to postpone, but before we make our decision about whether we're going to rule or vote on it tonight or not, then I had a bunch of questions. So this is something I've mentioned before in previous meetings, you know, that the school system has an obligation to ensure kind of a diverse population, to provide equal educational opportunities. And one of the things, the language it uses now, if you look at the Office of Civil Rights website, which I did today, is that school districts have a responsibility to avoid racial isolation. So there are always some issues with that. You have to deal with geographic issues, and in the past they've used busing for that, and that's not optimal. But with that kind of background, I guess my question is this proposal to rezone 300 kids away from Lafayette to Northside the only option that was considered by staff before this was presented to the board, or were there other options or discussions of ways to improve or increase the population at Northside without having to rezone kids out of Lafayette High School? That's my first question.
So, Ms. Morris, we asked Mike Hefner to take a look at whether or not there was an opportunity to move some students into the Northside zone. He brought to us this geographical area and said, in his opinion, this was the model that would make the most sense. He did not bring to us an option B or C. If you would like Mr. Hefner to take a look at other ways to increase enrollment, we'll be happy to ask Mr. Hefner.
Well, I think that's looking at zoning as the only possibility, and I think there's probably some other creative ways of thinking. So, for instance, I'm going to use Lafayette High School as the example, since that's the counter school in this proposal. Like, how many out-of-zone kids attend Lafayette High School? We have several programs over there. We bring in out-of-zone kids, but with this proposal, we're saying you're zoned for Lafayette High School, but we're going to allow the out-of-zone kids to stay here, and we're going to make you move to another school. So there are other options. You can say, for instance, and I'm not suggesting this, so nobody panic, but you could say, for instance, or at least examine it, we will no longer accept any out-of-zone kids at Lafayette High School. And that's going to move a lot of kids and decrease the population at Lafayette High School, while also increasing, potentially, the population at Northside High School. But my question, I guess, for the staff is, has anybody considered any of those other possibilities, or is this the simplest, easiest, first option that's being presented to the board to just move these 300 kids? You're zoned, but you're not anymore. It's the easiest thing. We're not going to dig deeper into these questions.
So I had also brought up later on the agenda item is an adjustment to the satellite transportation as a way to encourage enrollment increases and reduce the enrollment at Lafayette High. So we're open. Those are kind of the two that we came up in the last month in terms of trying to reduce the the need for the temporary classrooms at Lafayette High and try to utilize vacant classrooms at Northside.
Okay. So just a couple more questions, and I see that Ms. Williams is here, so she may be the better person to answer some of these or just to clarify. But Ms. Williams, you can come on up. Is Spanish currently offered at Northside High School? Is Spanish offered at all the other high schools?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. What about physics? Do you have a physics class? No?
Ms. Morris,
Physics.
just to be fair to Northside, they have currently, as of about this week, they have 660 students total.
I'm going to get there, Dr. Aguilar.
If Ms. Williams showed us 20 students who wanted Spanish, we would staff them with a Spanish teacher or a physics teacher or a calculus teacher. And forgive me, we were trying to increase the student population of Northside High School. We did not dwell on what would happen if the board directed that students could not attend schools out of zone. I believe that's a function of an action the board needs to take.
But it has to be brought to us before we can consider it, right?
And with all due respect to the board, if we bring this up again, it may come back to you with a strong recommendation to shut down any movement of students out of zone, and it would be upon the board to decide yes or no if you want to do that. There was a citizen who came up at the committee meeting to say just that, is that we are doing some things that, when you think about the consequences, we are delaying the shuffling of students to accommodate the existing facilities. And you as a board, you have the authority, you have the potential to move programs, to lock down attendance out of zone. And I will be very happy to bring that to you at the March meeting.
Well, and I guess my concern is that this proposal is being brought to us tonight without there being sufficient due diligence and all the options being presented to us. It's one thing at a time. So just a couple of more questions I wanted to ask. And the reason I was asking Ms. Williams those questions is I started this off with saying that under federal law, we are obligated to provide equal educational opportunities. And I've heard this rationale many times. Well, Northside is too small and it doesn't have sufficient kids. I don't think that relieves us of our obligation, especially when, through the past decades, the reason Northside is so small is because the district has made it that small by allowing children to go to schools of choice to other zones because of the low grade and the opportunity to choose another school. But I don't think we're relieved of the obligation to make sure every child at Northside has the same educational opportunities. It's not their fault their school only has 600 students. And so I think that's part of the issue. And I'm not expecting answers on this tonight. I guess what I would like is for your staff to, one, look at the suggestions made by the Office of Civil Rights as ways to consider redistributing population in a race-neutral way that complies with all the applicable U.S. Supreme Court cases and affords all of the students the equal educational opportunities. I'm not sure that we are prepared at this time to vote on these kind of proposals without knowing more information, especially the academic effects of these kinds of changes in what we're doing. I think we're selling our students short on that. And then my very last comment on it is I know that for our schools of choice, which I believe to be a luxury service that this district provides. I had one parent who has some children at one of the immersion programs email me, and maybe the other ones, who said that the district needed to focus on the crucial, critical services it provides. I agree. That is providing academic services. The schools of choice are luxury services. So when we're making proposals to move kids around, we have to remember that. The schools of choice are the luxury, and the rest of it is providing the educational opportunities to our students. And so we need to consider, I know it's not popular, I know that there's a whole group of parents who object to doing any changes to certain schools of choice. Others they're not interested in, but they're very particular ones. But those are luxury services that we provide that we're not obligated to provide. So we need to meet our obligations under federal regulations and not cater to the luxury services. So I think that it's important that the entire staff keep that in mind when these proposals are being brought to us.
All right, any other board member comment on the motion to postpone? Mr. Broussard.
Yes, thank you. On last year, we put together a proposal for rezoning and redistricting. And the numbers last year was Northside was 697 students. Today, we've got 660 students. The redistricting was supposed to bring 1,079 students to Northside. Instead, we're dropping student population. We had put the administrative rule to where juniors and seniors can stay to the school they're at, but I would like to know, how did we, if we put this in place and it's supposed to be to perfection, how did we lose students? We had the administrative rule for the juniors and the seniors, but the freshmen were supposed to be registered this year at the school, but we lost 37 students and supposed to have a population of over 400 than all we are now.
I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Broussard, Northside opened in August with about 720 students, and the enrollment today is about 660. The administrative rule, it creates about a 3-year process to fully implement any rezoning. And so it's a matter of move programs to Northside High School, or expand the school zone for attendance, or look at other options to increase enrollment. The board has 3 academies at Northside High School: the Law Academy, the Broadcasting Academy, and the Health Academy. The Health Academy had 12 students this year, 12 students in the Health Academy. We mentioned a couple of days ago that there were 10 students who had signed up for year 2 of the Health Academy, but in looking at the applications, there are only 2 eligible students for the Health Academy at Northside High School. Earlier tonight, you approved a budget adjustment to the Health Academy at Northside High School. So all told, for 2 years of effort, we will have 12 students in the Health Academy at Northside High School. It may be time to reconsider whether the Health Academy is viable at Northside High School. And it may be time to look at maybe looking at the zone, correcting rules that have been in place. And I believe some of those rules need to go to you, the board, for you to take action so that the public knows that that's what you want done in terms of, are we continuing to allow students who can get to a satellite stop to go to a school that they want to go to? Or are we going to be more selective about program placement and attendance in school zones? And that's not something that I should be expected to do for this district. It's directives that you give to me so that we can give you back some recommendations for consideration.
I understand that. What I'm saying is that we did not give the redistricting a chance to work, and now we're moving a whole new zone to recommended to move a whole new zone to Northside, and we didn't allow what we done last year to even take place, to take roots. I understand we've got to stay on top of it and make sure it works to perfection, but I thought it was 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But now we're making this move.
Mr. Broussard, if you would like us to wait 3 years, but I don't think that's what Julia wants for Northside High School. It was a recommendation that came from my administration to try to find a way to fill seats at Northside High School.
Mr. Angel.
Dr. Aguilar, you mentioned there were 12 students in the health academy at Northside.
Yes, sir.
How many students are in the health academy at Lafayette High?
So, Mr. Angel, they like the ninth grade class has 100 seats, and right now there are 151 students who want one of those 100 seats. So, about 100 per year goes into the health academy at Lafayette High School. Now, it drops off as you get to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
While I have the floor, let me just congratulate the principal, the teachers, and everyone at Northside for the gains that were made in this past year. I mean, I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Mr. Hidalgo.
I want to echo Mr. Angel's comments. I want to thank you all. I think Northside is not just a good school, in many ways, and in its own way, a great school. So I want to thank you for what you do. I think that Mr. Broussard, we could wait and see what happens, but typically progress is this way and not that way. And we saw it go this way this year. And I think that we're doing a disservice to the entire parish when we put funding into a program that we see going in reverse, instead of maybe taking that funding and putting it back into students. I'm not saying this zone that was redrawn is the zone that needs to be voted on, but I am in complete favor of removing the programs that, while they are good programs, they are not doing what they were put there to do. And we need to put students in Northside High School. You have 50 somewhat, or whatever the number was, on the waiting list at Lafayette High who are probably not even thinking about making the jump, right? And so what are we doing? We're putting a program that's not fully implemented, because I would doubt that it's a mirror image of the program at Lafayette High. And we're putting it at Northside to try to fill with students. And when we implemented schools of choice, when this district did it many, many years ago, it did it for the opposite reason. It did it so students could get out. Now we're trying to bring them in through the program. It just doesn't make sense. We need to populate the school and give the school the resources it needs to educate the kids, but not to keep pumping these programs into the school when it's not. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. You've got a law, the only law program, and how many students are in that program?
349. Or law program? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were back on Health Academy. No, hold on. My apologies.
18 goons?
Law Studies has 78 kids enrolled.
That's great. I mean, you know, are we proportionally pumping the same amount of money into that program as we are other programs? So look, again, we have many concerns. I'm in favor of the rezoning. We're going to possibly postpone it tonight. I'm in favor of the rezoning and stop pumping money into the programs. It is not an efficient way to spend taxpayer dollars to keep pumping money into programs that are not successful, because 12 students, and 2 applied this year. It's disappointing.
Ms. Morris.
Just a couple of follow-up comments. One, the fact that there are 100 seats at Lafayette High with 51 on the waiting list tells me that the kids there are primarily applying to the school and not the program, especially when there are open seats at Northside. And that's an issue that needs to be studied and analyzed and researched by staff to figure out, do we want to keep a program that is intended or is being used only as a means to get in the Lafayette High School door when they're really not that interested in the program itself? There's no reason for that. Second thing is, I agree absolutely that we need to increase the population at Northside. It is a great school. I have involvement, or I've been involved with the legal program in the past. I think that we're doing it a great disservice. So I do agree. Now, whether this is the correct zone to change or not, I'm not sure about, and I'm willing to defer this to a later date for further study. I only want assurance from the entire administrative staff that if this board at some point votes to rezone some kids to Northside, that absolutely everything is going to be done to ensure that every single kid at Northside gets equal educational opportunities, regardless of the fact that it will still be the smallest school in the parish. That is not an excuse, and it's not a rationale for not letting every single kid have the same number of opportunities for AP classes, physics, Spanish, calculus, or anything else that's not being currently provided to those kids at Northside, even if there's one student who needs those services.
All right. Any other board member comment on the motion to postpone? Dr. Chasson.
Really quickly, Doc. There was a, or actually Ms. Samick and Mr. Craig, there was a breakdown that I had requested. I didn't know if you guys were able to gather it up for us.
That was the students from the out of zone for the different, for Lafayette High?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So we have, so 9 to 12th grade at Lafayette High School's Health Careers, Acadiana High since 68, Karen Crow 64, 88 kids currently at Lafayette High in zone, 74 from Northside, 44 from Como, and 11 from Southside.
Okay, so that was the possible spot zone?
No, no, sir. That's the enrollment of students currently at Lafayette High's health academies by the different school zones.
Okay, but the 310 possible kids.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that number. Yeah, the possible spot rezone of the 310 kids, where they already attending school and where they slated. You know, some of those kids technically wouldn't end up at Northside anyway, based upon they're already in an academy somewhere else, type thing.
So I may misunderstood the data request, but one of the attachments there's, I was my understanding you'd wanted the enrollment in the grades prior to high school, so we could get an idea that once the administrative rule played out, the local population that would go there.
Okay.
And it's typically, if you look from, that's an attachment, but if you look from K to 8, anywhere from 55 to 65 kids in that spot zone at each grade level. So once the administrative rule played out, not considering who might apply for a Magnet Schools Academy, about 280 kids based on the current enrollments in that zone would go to Northside.
Okay, I got you. All right. Let me make a second request, if you would mind. I actually somewhat started that process today. I'd like to take a look at the actual breakdown of regular ed kids, kids that aren't in the gifted program, kids that aren't in a school of choice, and basically not necessarily a comparison, because I'd like to know how they're all doing, but any kids that attend any high school that we have, just a breakdown of what those regular ed kids are doing and how are they performing as a whole when it comes to the entire parish. So basically, Lafayette High kids not in any academy, Northside kids not in any academy. Does that make sense? Okay. All right.
Dr. Chasson, for clarification, you'd want that metric to be end of course test results?
That's a good question. Yeah, basically anything that would have to factor into the key factors of, oh, well, that has to do with their school performance score. So Northside moves up to a C.
That's primarily EOC, yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, rookies.
All right. Do we have any other board member comment on this motion to postpone?
Yeah.
Dr. Chasson.
I was going to make a statement, very short, that there were just a few things that worried me and concerned me. I even called Dr. Aguilar about it today. Spoke with a few of my board members. Spoke with Mr. Broussard about it. When it comes to that particular spot rezone, me and Mr. Latchley talked about 2 days ago. And I'm all for bringing more kids to Northside because we need more kids. School is half full. However, we want to be sure that it actually fits and works properly. Because although I'd like to pretend that I'm not from a certain area. I mean, if you ask me up until the age of 15 years old, where I was born and raised, I would tell you I'm from Macomb. And some of those kids are from Fightonville. And strangely enough, even though we'd like to pretend like everything is all kumbaya and hallelujah, you mix a certain group of kids and it results in probably some of the issues that they may be having at Lafayette High as well. But I still want those kids. So with that being said, I'm not going to ask Ms. Williams, because I don't want anybody to even remotely think that we talked about it. It just happened to come up today. So I'm not going to ask you, because I know what your answer would be, could be, and should be. I just want to piggyback off of the Spanish and physics and any courses that we may or may not be missing. I would greatly, like beyond greatly, appreciate it if we could please, like as of tomorrow, formally start the process to acquire a Spanish teacher, whether or not we have enough kids to field a full classroom. I mean, there's certain classes that we have to be engaged in. I had a great calculus teacher. I had a great physics teacher. She's actually at Como now. And that gave me the basis for the science background that I have today. So if we could start that process, I'd appreciate it. I'm not going to sit here and bash anyone. I was aware of this. We've spoken to everyone plenty of times about it. We know there wasn't enough kids, yet still needs to occur. Lastly, that's it. That's it for me.
All right, Madam Secretary, I call for the vote to postpone this item.
Eight for, none against.
All right, motion passes to postpone. Next item on the agenda, 514, spot rezone Evangeline Elementary to Live Oak Elementary.
Motion to postpone.
We have a motion to postpone this item, 514, with a second for Ms. Morris. So Dr. Chasson is the motion maker and a second for Ms. Morris. Do we have any public comment on the motion to postpone the spot rezone from Evangeline to Live Oak? No public comment. Any board member comment that is not repetitive of the previous motion to postpone?
Actually, Mr. President, I'd like to know if it's the same reason, or, the basis of the same reason.
I would like to take a look at possible other rezones and any other possible options, because we were only given one. So if they're trying to alleviate temporary classrooms at Evangeline, I'd like to know all the possible options, as opposed to just giving me one and, oh, well, that does it. Same thing like this initial Lafayette High one. I was very excited about it initially, and then when you go home one night and think about it, you receive that one phone call that jogs your mind about, yeah, you're a little grown up now, but you got to remember how things were when you were still growing up in that area. We would fight up and down South Magnolia. So I would just like to be sure that's the only possible option. I'd just like to look at them all.
Ms. Morris.
Is Live Oak currently overpopulated for the physical facility without any zoning?
No, ma'am. They actually have a couple of empty classrooms right now, no portable buildings.
Okay. And then I guess my next question is, this is something that I had talked to Dr. Aguilar about previously, and I think he and his staff were looking at it. Evangeline is basically on the same campus as Acadian Middle, and we know there's an entire wing empty at Acadian Middle. Is anything being done with that empty wing at Acadian Middle?
Ms. Morris, it's not quite a whole wing that's empty. They have about 4 classrooms as well. We're going to work with the architect for the Evangeline Wing addition and make sure that we fill up the available seats at Acadian Middle. We also saw the potential at Live Oak to move about 60 kids as well. So,
because I know we had talked about the possibility or exploring the possibility of moving the 5th graders from Evangeline to Acadian. And
yes,
those
ma'am.
empty
We're
seats
still
freed up.
looking at that, and more than likely that is likely going to be the end result of our study.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board member comments to postpone this item? Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote.
Eight for, none against.
Next item on the agenda is 5:30, pay for performance stipend.
Mr. President, I move that the board direct the superintendent to bring this to us next month with a more stratified metric of performance.
Can we simplify that motion, just postpone, and you give him the direction?
I gave him the direction in the motion.
Okay.
I'd like us
So
all to
lots
give
of
him the
type.
direction. I believe we don't do that enough. We don't do that enough when he requests it.
Okay.
Can you repeat that?
Direct the board, direct the superintendent to bring this back next month with a more stratified metric of performance.
So we have a motion from Mr. Santani and a second from Mr. Angel to bring this back next month with a more stratified metric of performance.
Mr. Santania, I understand what stratified means. Can you be a little more specific?
All right. Do we have any public comment on the motion to bring this back next month with a more stratified metric for performance? No public comment. Any board member comment? Mr. Santani.
I feel very strongly that if we're going to have a pay-for-performance program, and I think we all can be on board with rewarding employees for exceptional performance, I also feel very strongly that 97% of the employees should not receive the bonus. We have, according to the metric attached to the agenda item, we have 2 ineffective teachers in this parish out of 1,931. I'm not going to say we have more than that. I'm just going to say that that is an exceptionally low number. We have 53 effective emerging teachers, 655 effective proficient, and 1,221 highly effective teachers. Now, that resembles a very simple, if we think back to our Algebra 1, a very simple positive slope graph. The number at each tier increases. When, generally speaking, when you're talking about a distribution of anything, it will more closely resemble a bell curve where the tips are very narrow. You have a smaller number of highly effective, a smaller number of ineffective, and then more in the middle. I think, I don't know what the appropriate metric is. I know we could probably be here all night talking about whether the compass metric is the right way to do it. I know that. But I don't know what the right metric is. I do know that, or I do believe strongly that whatever the subset of 1,931 classroom teachers we are paying for performance needs to be a smaller percentage than 97. Hopefully you'll agree with me.
Thank you. So, any other board member comment on the motion to postpone this till next month with a more stratified metric?
So who's the second?
Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote.
Okay, he's done. He's done. You voted? Yeah. 7-4, none against.
Motion passes to delay this to next month. Next item on the agenda is 534, policy EGD, casualty insurance.
I move that the board approve the revision to policy EGD with this one particular change of the amount of authority from $50,000 to $20,000.
We have a motion. Any second?
A second for discussion.
All right, we have a motion for Ms. Morris, second by Mr. Hidalgo. Do you have any public comment on this item to approve this policy with the revisions Ms. Morris mentioned? Hold on. Nope, no public comment. Board member comment. Mr. Santani.
Is this is strictly for liability, right? This isn't workers' comp or?
It's workers' comp and liability, Ms. Bernard? Yes, both.
Yeah, I thought.
Okay.
Did you intend to make? Did you want to reduce that limit also on workers' comp?
It's not before us, but
okay.
If it comes before us, I would make the same motion.
Did you believe that that was the case? I guess that's my question.
Well, I wasn't sure.
Okay.
Workers' comp is already lower. Workers' comp is lower than this.
We have a written policy
Yes.
with a settlement authority for workers' comp?
Yes.
We do? What is it?
It's 20. It's 20.
And what's the policy number? You can get back to me later on it,
It's
but
ED, I believe.
I have a question for council.
Yes.
Would it be more effective if would it be legal, and would it be more effective if we went into executive session to discuss our staff settlement authority? In my opinion, to have a fruitful discussion, I don't really want to broadcast to the public. I mean, once the policy is done, the policy is, and it's public, but the discussions to get to that number, whether it's 50,000, 500,000, 5 million, I don't think should be done in public.
That's not really, there's no exception to the open meetings law that would allow you to go into executive session to have
There
that
is
discussion.
provisions regarding discussions. I mean, to me, this is directly related to how much someone's going to ask us for if they know they want a settlement from the staff that doesn't go to the board.
That it's not a specific case.
Right. That's why you ask counsel. So, if you will entertain a comment on this, if you would consider changing your motion potentially to removing the where it says the settlement authority for the superintendent or his designee. I don't believe that the superintendent should designate settlement authority. I believe he should be the one held accountable for those decisions. Secondly, if you're going to reduce the superintendent's authority, I suggest that the board consider allowing the superintendent to consult the board president for a slightly higher amount or a higher amount, and then you're empowering the president. I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the position. You will empower the president to be in a position to, one, the president has to answer to the board. For example, if I were to say, hey guys, and I authorize the superintendent to settle a case for $40,000, I may feel comfortable with that, but there may be situations where the president is, you know what, I have the authority to do that, but I think it needs to go to the board. I would feel more comfortable with it going to the board. So I would maybe suggest considering a two-tiered approval process before it came to the board with whatever dollar amount.
Before she does that, I'd like to make a comment. I have I have all the faith in the world in especially our current superintendent, to be able to make these types of decisions, as well as his designee. My concern is what you brought up. You're publicizing a number. When a claim comes before us, like we've seen many times in executive session, that number should not be publicized, right? It kind of goes back to our bid law. We approve a budget of $100,000 to do this project. What do you think the project's going to cost? $100,000. So I have all the faith in the world in the superintendent. So I don't say this against the superintendent or his team, but maybe there should be zero.
Ms. Morris.
So prior to the past 3 years of my service on the board, I spent about 15 years defending the school board in litigation cases, workers' comp and casualty, as well as employment claims. And the settlement authority that Ms. Bedard and the superintendent at the time had has always been $20,000. I can tell you that every single attorney in the entire Acadiana area, whoever sues the school board, knows that authority. It's not a secret. It's been out there for more than 20 years, maybe even longer than that. So I don't think, I think that we should just maintain the current settlement authority. I think we can look back over the last 3 years and see that there have only been a handful of cases where our council has come to talk to us to get settlement authority. So it has not been an issue or a crisis. It's not overburdening the board to have these short executive sessions to have these discussions. So I don't see any reason to increase this amount. And I think that where it's been at 20,000 has been sufficient.
All right, any other comments? So the motion is to approve the policy as written, except for changing the amount from 50,000 to 20,000. And we have a question for Mr. Santani.
Very short one. What does actions of its employees cover?
A bus driver rear ends a car.
Sure. No, I kind of. Oh, so premises. So actions of its employees is not necessarily
within the course and scope of their employment with the school system.
Okay. So even you know personnel administration, things like wrongful termination, things like that.
It could be if it falls under the casualty policy.
Okay.
It would be governed by the insurance policy.
Thank you.
Not this policy.
Okay.
It wouldn't be E&O errors and omissions like we talked about, but it could potentially be sexual harassment claims,
okay.
Discrimination claims, wrongful termination claims. Those could all fall under that.
Thank you.
I'm willing to entertain changing my motion if other board members indicate a willingness to add in the board president in collaboration with the superintendent, or I'm okay with the way it is.
My point in the president is that the superintendent or his designee could settle $500,000 in cases in a year, and this board never know about it. We stand here, or I'm sorry, sit here and argue over, and I shouldn't say argue, debate over $10,000 decisions, yet we're not necessarily going to be in the loop for potentially significant amounts of money leaving the system. So I do think that the staff needs settlement authority. I think there needs to be checks and balances, and I think there just needs to be a method to keep the board informed. And I think that having, and it could be the vice president, it could be a committee. I just think there needs to be some sort of check and balance between the staff and the board as far as money leaving the system.
Then perhaps we could add some language to the motion that has a reporting requirement that after any such settlement, the superintendent or his designee will report same to the sitting board president.
And I think a easy revision is the superintendent and president shall be authorized to settle, because if the superintendent and the president agreed to authorize to settle for 20,000 or 50 or whatever it ends up being, then there's at least a representative of the board informed of that settlement decision.
I just will make, if I can make one comment on that. I think that for a recommendation, either you're going to want to require a board approval or a vote, or not a board, either authorize the superintendent to make the decision or not. I'm not sure what one board member acting singularly is, whether it's the president or the vice president. If it's a committee, perhaps that's a vote occurring, that's a board action. But one member of the board approving a settlement is...
It's more than two. I mean, it's more than one. Two people is more than one. And
that's two people, but that's only one board member.
Correct, but this board member, this position, is elected by their peers.
We could put some other cap on it, perhaps, that if there's more than 5 settlements, or the settlements in a given fiscal year are exceeding $100,000, however many that might be, 5 or 6, then at that point, I don't know. I mean, there are other ways to control it,
right,
probably beyond this current motion.
Either, I would say, cap it, you know, at a lower amount, or make it a reporting requirement. I think it's a questionable, you know, if the board president or whoever the one person is has an opinion that happens to differ from the rest of the board members, whose decision is that? If it's a board decision, then it's a board as a body's decision.
Right, but like I mentioned before, the person in this seat was elected by the people at this table to represent them. And I mean, as you saw when the meeting started, and we have other past presidents here, the president is required to sign a whole lot of stuff and authorize a whole lot of stuff. At the same time, the president's accountable for the decisions the president makes representing the board. What could happen without this board knowing is an employee could do something, right? And the superintendent, again, these are just general positions. I'm not talking about Dr. Aguilar or me. The superintendent could agree to settle out with that employee, right? And it could be for something that is embarrassing to the school system. And 6 months down the road, the news media finds out that the Lafayette Parish school system settled something, right? But the elected members of this board, none of them, not one, would have any inkling that that settlement happened without including a board member in this process. Now, if that news media thing happened, then the board could look at me and say, Eric, you knew about this, but you didn't tell us? You didn't just tell us? We understand you don't need our permission, but you didn't tell us about it? You know, it was in my district, or it was something that is embarrassing. So that's my point, is I feel like there needs to be a check. Literally, this is the board that is authorizing those checks to go out. So I think there needs to be a check in the process that at least keeps the board informed of any settlement.
I think that one thing one thing that we could consider is that, let's say, for example, that Ms. Bernard agrees to settle a case for $20,000. At that point, the attorneys prepare either a consent judgment or settlement documents. Typically, either Ms. Bernard will sign as the school board representative, or even the defense attorney or the superintendent. Because the board president signs off on many other contracts and everything else, this could be considered another contract that a board president has to sign off on. Not necessarily to approve, but just to sign off on as the board, because this is a settlement with the board, and it's not a settlement with Ms. Bernard or Dr. Aguilar. So we could require a signature, or add a signature requirement of the board president on the consent judgments or settlement agreements, so that you have knowledge that it has occurred.
Well, I think
maybe another
I
control.
Think what you're saying is exactly what I'm saying, is that the mechanism of settling is that authorization. But right now we're only authorizing the superintendent or his designee. We're not putting, so that means if Dr. Aguilar signs it, or if Ms. Bernard signs it, it's an obligation from the board. If you require the superintendent and the vice president or the president or the person from District 3, then we'll have a check.
So as a matter of semantics, a settlement occurs when there's an offer and acceptance, and it can be verbal or by email. So that's when it occurs. The formal document is just the formalization of the agreement, usually to file with the court system or just to have a record to make it. So I think perhaps having a signature requirement is not one where the board president is approving the settlement. It's mostly just signing an acknowledgement of the settlement. But it's a way for the board president to be made aware of the number of settlements being confected and about the settlements themselves. So it could be a simple solution to the knowledge, a reporting requirement perhaps.
All right, I've said my piece. So any other is there, if there's not a motion modification or any other comment?
I'd say I'll leave my motion where it is now, and if we want to add in the signature piece, we can come back with that so we can flush it out exactly the way we want it.
All right. Okay. So the motion is to approve the policy with the revision of $50,000 to $20,000. No other board member comment. Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote.
Eight for, none against.
All right, next item on the agenda is item 538, satellite bus transportation French immersion.
I'll pull that one. I'll make a motion to approve. I just had a question.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the satellite bus transportation French immersion with a second from Mr. Hidalgo. And I'll take a moment to read these. That the board approves satellite bus transportation to the elementary French immersion schools be approved as follows. Number 1, students attending Evangeline Elementary for French immersion would receive satellite transportation if they live in Carencro Heights Elementary, J.W. Falk Elementary, Alice Boucher Elementary, and Live Oak Elementary school zones. Number 2, students attending Prairie Elementary for French immersion would receive satellite transportation if they live in the Broadmoor Elementary, Charles Burke Elementary, and Ridge Elementary school zones. Number 3, students attending Myrtle Place Elementary will receive satellite bus transportation if they attend Plantation Elementary, Catherine Drexel Elementary, G.T. Linden Elementary, Ernest Scarlett Elementary, Milton Elementary, and Woodville Elementary school zones. Number 4, if French immersion expansion is approved for Westside Elementary, students attending Westside Elementary for French immersion would receive satellite transportation if they live in Dusson Elementary, Austin Elementary, and S.J. Montgomery Elementary school zones. Students attending French immersion living outside their satellite transportation zone will be required to provide their own transportation to their immersion school. So, do we have any public comment on this motion? Any board member comment on this motion? Mr. Broussard.
I've just got one question. Mr. Joe, Ms. Gregg.
Yes, sir.
How many students, is there a number that's required to pick up a student, 1 or 2 students at a satellite? Or whoever's there, we pick up? How do we determine that bus service to that satellite?
So ridership fluctuates wildly. This past fall, when parents would request a satellite stop, we typically looked for 15 students. That wasn't really a set number. What happens is you have the kids live, say, off in North University, and so you put a satellite stop up there at North University. A lot of the kids don't catch the satellite stop closest to their home. The parent drops them off at a satellite stop on the way to the work, or the parent drops them off at an end zone bus stop for that school. So the bus drivers were instructed that, you know, if a kid showed up at your bus stop and that's the school they were going to, take them to school regardless of where they live. So we've kind of settled in now. People have become habituated to where they want to drop their kids and pick them up. we really didn't close after, say, September. We didn't close any satellite stops, but like I had a request recently to add a satellite stop this point in the year, and they've only got 4 kids. Well, I really don't have the capacity to create a satellite stop for 4 kids. We kind of look at some of the daycares in Karen Crow this past fall. They would give us 10 or 15 kids, and so we did create satellite stops for those folks, in particular for J.W. James, for the kids going to the Karen Crow area. So there's not a set number. The ridership fluctuates dependent, and I hope there's not a lot of changes to transportation this coming summer, because the routing specialists and transportation, we can kind of lock in the riderships. The bus drivers know their routes, they know their kids. And we got it now. The kids have become accustomed to where their stop is. We can get a better count in going into year 2.
So we pretty much know how many students that's going to be attending Evangeline for French at these satellite stops. We gotta.
Ms. Samick and me actually sat with technology and utilizing the Guide K-12 software. It really, if you parsed out those kids by the school, those elementary school districts, they really did balance out to about the same number of kids. The exception was kind of the Southeast and Myrtle, but we have more schools attending Myrtle because it's a standalone French immersion school. But in general, just based on home residences, the kids balanced out. I don't know, 120, something like that was kind of the number of the kids that would live in any particular zone. Again, the Myrtle Place southeastern quadrant was a little higher.
Mr. Santani.
Have we created, if we adopt this proposal here, have we created a proximity priority for these schools? Because we certainly, I don't feel we can. We certainly can't tell someone that unless you go to this French immersion school, you don't get bus transportation, and then deny them the ability to go to that French immersion school. Right? Anyone? Are we like are we gonna let someone get in? Prairie every year has more applicants than seats, right? I mean, I'm legitimately asking a question if anybody knows the answer.
This year we have 10 more applicants than seats.
Okay. So let's say there are one of the 10 kids who doesn't get in is going to live in the, I'm trying to find lives in the Charles Burke zone. That student would, I hopefully have listed one of the other schools on the list as their second choice or third choice or whatever choice. And we would say, well, you got into this school, but you don't get bus transportation.
That's the way the item is currently written, but kind of like we said at the committee, the one parent says you should have to go to the one that you're closest to.
Well, sure, and but that's my point. Like, but we don't have a mechanism in the lottery to say that the kids, like if one of the 10 kids who doesn't get into Prairie doesn't get in because kids from one of those someone outside of those zones that get transportation to Prairie is taking the seat. Like now you're telling the kid, not only do you not get to go to Prairie, but we're also not going to bring you there. You know, we're not going to give you the opportunity to go to Prairie, even though we're saying if you want bus transportation, you got to go there. That was my first concern. The second concern was slightly less impactful in that I think that either the S.J. Montgomery zone either all needs to get transportation to Myrtle Place, because I could see where Myrtle Place provides an opportunity because it starts later than the other elementary schools, and so you can bring all the kids to their zoned elementary school and then have one bus go to wherever the immersion school is. And because Myrtle Place starts a half hour later than Montgomery, and Montgomery's only 3 miles away, I think either the entire zone needs to go to Myrtle Place, or if we need to have some kids with transportation to the west side, everything above Erass Landry or above Cameron Street in the S.J. Montgomery zone, I think would be a good mix. But I think it would make a lot more sense logistically to include the Montgomery kids in the Myrtle transportation, because it's a very short drive and Myrtle starts later. So I have some real concerns about whether, I think we need to provide transportation, and I think it's reasonable to say we're not going to go to Judice and pass up, send a bus to Judice and pass up Prairie, bring you to Myrtle Place. I think that's entirely reasonable. But if we're going to tell them that, we got to let them go to Prairie. So.
Sorry, I was reading.
All right. So the question that I had, the reason I pulled it is, so currently with the lottery, a parent says, I want my child in French immersion, and I'm choosing this school. Is that right?
Yes.
So somebody could live right next door to Evangeline, want to go to French immersion, and say, I'm not going to Evangeline. I want to go to Prairie on the other side of town, or I want to go to West Side. I want to go to any of the schools except for the school that's in my backyard. That's how our lottery is set up.
Yes.
So basically it's set up to give the parents a choice of school, and it's not truly a school of choice. If the parents are truly interested in the program for what it is, and I think the French immersion program is pretty equivalent at all the schools, it's a strong program, we should require those kids to go to the school that is closest to where they live. And that's it. What they should be choosing during the lottery is, I want to choose French immersion, period. And then they go to the school that is closest to them as long as there are seats available.
Agreed.
Dr. Cecil.
Ms. Morris, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you. My question is, when it comes to this scenario of Prairie fills up. So my question is, and listen, this is no sarcastic question whatsoever. I need some input. If Prairie fills up and you live by Prairie, and the only place that has available spots is now still Evangeline, and the program is more important than the school, so that kid won't receive transportation. That is something I'd like us to take a look at, or possibly tweak if possible at all. And I guess I just answered my own question then. I think Justin answered it as well. If you attend Evangeline now and you're in the French immersion, you had a stop. Let's say you live in the Broadmoor area, but you couldn't get into whatever school was closest. So you're in the second grade French immersion at Evangeline. You currently have a satellite stop?
That would have been a satellite stop.
So now, starting next year, if we approve it, then that kid wouldn't receive transportation. Okay. All right. I got it. And then actually someone texted me that's watching the meeting, and they said that the Evangeline spot rezone that we were looking at would be pointless if we passed the French immersion transportation zone. So that kind of lost me until they broke it down and explained that, because all the kids that aren't able to go to Prairie or Myrtle, if they're really choosing the program, then they would not have transportation. And all those kids would technically, you would hope they'd want to go to Evangeline, but they wouldn't have transportation. And if we do offer transportation, vice versa, they were stating that if you're trying to spot rezone to get rid of some of the temporary classrooms, then if you do provide the transportation to get to Evangeline, then you're basically going to fill it back up. If we did the spot rezone and then still offered everything, so it's kind of a catch-22 double-edged sword type situation. Okay. Just some food for thought.
Mr. Broussard.
Is it possible, with all of the satellite stops and what we are asking or requiring us to do, to first fill the seats with the students that are zoned to go there, and then whatever if there's any seats left, enter that into a lottery? But I'm like Don. If I live across the street from one of these schools and and I don't get in, and somebody else from miles away gets in, I think it's unfair. It's unfair treatment. Is it possible? Is it legal or illegal that we do something like that? Fill the seats first with the students that are zoned for it, and then open up the seats to whatever else is left. Can we do that? Is it legal, or we'd rather not do it?
We can definitely do it. The issue is the way that the lottery was set up for this go-round pretty much has allowed the parents to select the program at the school as well. We do have 168 applicants for 184 seats, so it's definitely not over capacity. And some of the applicants are also duplicate applicants. For example, they may have chosen Prairie as their first choice and Myrtle Place as their second. So again, I think seats will be available. There's no guarantee on that anyone close to the school would get in, but it's something we can definitely put in place for the next lottery.
I think it will reduce our that's not important to reduce the transportation costs, but I think it makes it much easier. And if we start the process of going to the school closer to your area.
All right, any other board member comments on this motion? Mr. Angel.
I just have really a comment. I think, and I'm agreeing with it, I think that there's a feeling amongst ourselves that maybe we should pay a little more attention to a zone rather than a school. I mean, you know, we got people being shipped all over the place, skipping schools where they could be, the same services could be made for them. I think we're thinking more zoning. I think it's a good idea.
Dr. Chasson.
I actually just walked over to Mr. Hidalgo and I asked Ms. Morris as well, if we're lending ourselves to the zone concept, then we would technically want to do the same thing for the health academy in the near and dear future. As far as if you live in a certain area, then you get transportation. Then if not, then you don't receive it, which may help balance off the numbers, but then again, it may not.
Ms. Morris.
So I made the motion to approve, so we would have it open for discussion. I'm not in favor. I'm not opposed to the general idea of this, but I'd really like to see more explicit language from staff to be brought to us that says when you apply for French immersion, you're applying to the program and you go to the school closest to you, and if there are no seats available in that program, then you may have the opportunity to choose a second site, or you go to the second site closest to you. I think it needs to be restricted, and if we do that, it's going to take care of all the transportation issues, and we won't need all this convoluted stuff on here. So I'm going to withdraw the motion since I made it. I don't remember who seconded it, but
okay.
If not, I'm going to vote against it.
All right, so the motion is withdrawn by Ms. Morris and remade by Mr. Angel, and I think a second for Mr. Hidalgo.
Just wanted to.
Ms. Morrison.
Ms. Samick, I just wanted to be clear. So you said there's no opportunity to put those changes in place for this year. It would have to be next year? Is that having the students attend the French immersion program closest to where they live, because it wasn't set up that way? Is that right?
That's correct. The zoning, the transportation zones would actually facilitate the movement towards that, and next year would be a general lottery for French immersion. Contingent on where you live would be the school that you would be designated for. We actually discussed doing that. We just saw some parameters that were not in place to go forwards with it this year.
And if I may, Mr. Kosick, and I mean, I would say that if we move towards this more zoned type idea where you go to the school closest to where you live, I would have no problem with it matriculating out for the kids rather than pulling them out of another school. I would not entertain arguments from parents saying, well, little Johnny's in pre-K and my other 3 kids are older, so he should be allowed. If we change the rule and say, from here on out, when you apply to French immersion, you go to the school closest to you, period, end of discussion, and that's it, and it matriculates out. So, I mean, I think that we can make these rules much cleaner, very clear, unambiguous, and it may take several years, but it's going to resolve these issues.
All right. Mr. Santani.
I don't know what the appropriate method is, but I was going to make the motion because I do want to add the change that I spoke of earlier. So I'll offer an amendment to Mr. Angel's motion so we can vote on the amendment separately without killing his motion. I move to add or amend his motion that S.J. Montgomery Elementary School Zone be moved to number 3. And add.
So you're saying take it from 4 and put it in 3?
That's correct, as I discussed earlier. As well as add language that if parents would like to provide transportation to an existing satellite stop for any of the schools, they may do so.
We already do that by default.
Okay.
You're welcome to add that, but the bus drivers, if you can get to a satellite stop, pick them up.
Yes, and in no way am I suggesting that we create satellite stops to accommodate people driving, but if there is a stop there going to that school, that they are allowed to get on.
We have a proposed amendment on the floor. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hidalgo. All right, do we have any public comment on the amendment to the original motion by Mr. Angel? The amendment would move from, as it's written and displayed on the board, from number 4, we would take S.J. Montgomery and put it with number 3. And there would be an additional provision to allow students at the end there, at the last sentence, those students attending schools outside of their attendance zone would be required to provide their own transportation, or they would be provided transportation by providing transportation to one of our satellite pickup spots. So no public comment on that. Any board member comment on that?
Well, I'd like to make a comment, but I'll defer.
All right, Dr. Aguilar.
So, members of the board, pursuant upon your adoption of this motion, we will communicate with the lottery winners and notify them about the zone transportation, and then allow them to move between schools if necessary. So we will get you where you want to be this year, and then moving forward, we'll establish that through the lottery process.
Mr. Craig, does this amendment defeat some of the purpose? Were you trying to eliminate a stop or two?
No, sir, not at all. We're just trying to coordinate them, kind of like what you're saying, school zone. No, sir, I don't see us cutting back any satellite stops. We're just going to kind of centralize them to different areas of the parish.
Now look at the S.J. Montgomery zone. It's enormous. That's part of the reason why we had to take a little bit out of it earlier tonight. You're talking about from the interstate all the way down to Johnston Street. And you can concentrate those kids at the school because we've already got buses bringing them to school. And because Myrtle starts later, those kids that leave Montgomery to go to Myrtle won't be late for school.
Dr. Chesnell.
Question about adding to the amendment. If any of the possible schools end up full, as it reads, then that kid wouldn't be afforded transportation. So if that kid is a Prairie kid and is in the Prairie zone, Prairie ends up full, can we still offer that kid transportation to the next closest school? Because that's what everybody was talking about. I was just curious.
So it potentially is, there's the cost associated with it of a bus traveling across the district, and it probably will not have very many kids on it. But it would be possible. I mean, that's kind of what would happen is you're going to have a satellite stop somewhere in that parish or part of the parish that's not going to have very many kids on it.
All right, any other board member comment on the amendment? Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote. Yeah, the vote came up, but then it went down again. Okay, it's up again. Mr. Santani, does this have the language? The very bottom. Very bottom. Satellite transportation. Great. Did we get all the votes?
It's
5 for, 3 against.
All right, final item on the agenda for tonight, satellite bus transportation for the health career academies, that the board approves satellite bus transportation to the health career academies at Lafayette High School and Northside High School be divided along the following geographic lines. Students living west of I-49 and north of Johnston Street will have a satellite bus transportation to Lafayette High School, and students living east of I-49 south of Johnston Street will have satellite bus transportation provided to Northside High School. Students who live outside of a satellite transportation zone will have to provide their own transportation to the school. Do we have a motion on the floor? 539 was pulled by Mr. Santani, I would thought. Yeah. Do we have a motion? Anyone? For anything? So there is no motion for this item. All right. Hold on. Are you thinking about it? Anyone? Nobody has a motion. Okay. I just read it to you. Give me a second. Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second for Ms. Morris and Ms. Morrison. Any public comment? No public comment. Any board member comment on this item? Mr. Broussard.
I think there can be some of that same discussion that we just had. My interpretation of a zone line, north side, I think Pierce and Washington belongs to north sides, but we are allowing students from that area to be transported to Lafayette High when they live in the north side zone. That same conversation we had just a minute ago when we transporting students from across the street from the school that offers the same thing the school that they want to go to.
Ms. Morris.
So for the kids who live east of I-49 and south of Johnston Street, where are they currently zoned for?
The majority of those kids would, well, if you're east of 49, you're basically going to north side.
Are any of those kids not already zoned for north side?
Well, on the upper end of 49, you might be going to Karen Crow High. So when we looked at this split for transportation, again, we're talking about health careers. It didn't break out like the elementary school zones where there's not enough high schools, and so we ended up. I kind of used that foundational principle that Mr. Hefner uses and just kind of followed a geographic line. And by going down 49, the feeling was we're kind of splitting the upper part of the parish. I really didn't have a north-south road. I was trying to kind of split the demographics of the parish by going down 49 and then Johnson Street to Vermilion Parish.
It just seems like the practical effect of this, though, is that if you're zoned for North Side and you want to go to the Health Academy at Lafayette High School, drive yourself. Otherwise, everybody else in the parish gets a bus to Lafayette. That seems like the practical application, which doesn't seem fair.
Or if you live east of I-49, get to the satellite stop on the west side of 49. I admittedly, it's not a perfect solution. I'm just trying to bring some suggestions for you that we could discuss. We're more than willing to go back and look at it again.
How many kids live in that east of 49 and south of Johnston Street that we're transporting to Lafayette High School?
Again, it's a bit. If you divide it down the parish, it's about a half. It's about equally split, so 200 or so on each side. It actually works out pretty good in terms of balancing the raw number of kids.
Wait, how many? I thought you said earlier there were only like 300 kids in the Health Academy.
394, so roughly 400, so 200. One had a few more kids than the other.
Okay. Mr. Centani.
I'll just make a comment about trying to balance the kids. While there is a laudable goal to try to provide equal numbers of students with transportation, I think the more appropriate thing in this particular case is mileage from the zone where we're talking about to each school, in combination with, because I understand that there are going to be some places in the parish that may be a little farther, but easier to get to. So, talk about, like, say, maybe if you live in Broussard near where BO Elementary School is being built, I think it's probably going to be a far sight easier for you to get to Northside High School in the morning than it will be to get to Lafayette High School in the morning, even though Lafayette High School may be closer. I don't know for sure. So I think it makes very little sense to pick up somebody in Milton and bring them to Northside, because you're almost certainly going to be driving down Congress in front of Lafayette High to get there. So I am not opposed to the concept of the zone transportation, and I sure would say the same thing about the French immersion, where if you can drive yourself to a satellite stop and get on the bus all you want. But these lines, I think they need a little tweaking. So I would offer a substitute motion to send it back to staff for further review.
We have a substitute motion with a second to postpone the Senate back to staff for review. Any public comment? No public comment. Any board member comment?
Would the superintendent prefer any more direction than that for us to vote on?
No, I think that's fine. We're going to ask Mr. Hefner to take a look at this also and bring you back some options. It's not a perfect way to split the parish. There just aren't enough Health Academy programs. We talked earlier tonight about there essentially is no Health Academy program at Northside. That's the larger issue. Is you can draw a line at any location and you can mandate that kids go, but right now there aren't any going to Northside. But we'll ask Mr. Hefner to try to look at it and try to divide the parish.
All right, Ms. Samick.
So I just want to make sure everyone keeps this in mind, that Northside only has this year the freshman level courses. Next year they'll have freshmen and sophomore. So even for the transportation, you can't be transporting 11th and 12th graders to Northside unless we're just going to fast pace putting in all 4 levels next year. If so, I'm going to have to ask for some additional supplies to that cost center, because I only asked for 10th grade level. So that's a consideration out there, is keep in mind the transportation zone is either for 9th and 10th graders next year, or if it's for 9 through 12, we have to put in extra supports at Northside to make it happen.
All right, Mr. Hidalgo.
So I was initially upset that we chose tonight not to rezone that spot from Lafayette High to Northside, but now I'm not as upset about it. Dr. Aguilar made a good point. For the 10th time, maybe the 12th time, that it's not a thriving program in Northside. It is the first year, but that's not the point. You get 50 on the waiting list at Lafayette High, and you have 0 on the waiting list. You can't even fill the seats up at Northside. I think that it's, I don't know any nicer way to say it, it's just time for us to face the reality. If we draw that line, and now you start to send those students to Northside, many of them, if not all of them, are not going to go. So we're not hurting anything but the health program. So how simple would it be? Tonight, we didn't rezone, but we did put more money into a program at a school that's not working. So how about we take that program out, admit that we, you can call it a bad decision, you can call it, we tried it, it didn't work. Put it back where we know it works, and rezone and put kids at Northside. So I'm not going to put that as direction in the motion, but that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see Mr. Hefner come back with that type of a plan.
All righty. Anyone else? Okay. Madam Secretary, call for the vote.
Eight, 4, none against.
Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.